Hidden beneath the silent sand, in the depths of stone and darkness, lie the traces of worlds that should never have existed. They were built by those whose names have vanished from the Earth's memory. Scientists call this a coincidence, but the facts speak otherwise. These 35 mysteries are not legends. They are real places where history broke its own laws. The lost city of Ubar. In the southern Arabian Peninsula, amid the endless dunes of the Rub al-Khali, lies a place the desert refuses to give up. For centuries, caravanners told tales of a mythical city hidden beneath the sands, where the walls shone in the moonlight and the towers reflected the sun as if made of glass. It was called Iram, the city of pillars, Ubar, or simply the place God made disappear. No one knew where it was, but every ancient story began the same way, with a man lost in the sands and finding something he'd rather not see. Ubar is mentioned in ancient Arab chronicles, where it is called the city of those who rebelled against heaven. Legend said its inhabitants were rich, proud, and beyond measure. They erected pillars reaching to the sky and stored countless treasures beneath them. But one day, the sky fell silent, the wind died down, and the earth beneath the city trembled. The next morning, where the towers had stood, there was only a silent sea of sand. For a long time, it was believed that this was just a myth, that Ubar never existed, and the Bedouin tales were mere horror stories for travelers. But at the end of the 20th century, the myth suddenly came to life. A group of researchers working with new satellite images of the desert spotted a network of ancient caravan routes leading to a single point in the middle of a lifeless area. Where nothing should have been, the images revealed strange lines and shapes, as if frozen architecture were hidden beneath the sand. An expedition led by archaeologist Nicholas Clapp set out to search. With every kilometer, the sand became softer, the air denser, and even navigation became unresponsive. But one evening, as the sun disappeared behind the dunes, the ground beneath their feet sank. The researchers stood on the edge of a giant crater, extending into the depths. This was the entrance to a forgotten city. Ruins were revealed beneath layers of sand, the remains of walls and towers, constructed of white stone, fused and blackened by heat. Some fragments looked as if the stone had once melted, as if scorched by an incredibly powerful flame. Fragments of vessels, jewelry, and traces of caravan camps were found around. Most strikingly, the signs of collapse resembled not the ravages of time, but a catastrophe. It seemed as if the city had truly collapsed into the earth, as the ancients said. Scientists have suggested that the legend is based on a real event, the collapse of underground caves caused by a natural collapse. In these places, vast voids, carved by wind and water thousands of years ago, lie beneath the sand. When the vaults of such caves collapse, everything above disappears without a trace. But the explanation didn't allay the sense of mystery. Why were traces of fusion found all around? Why was the stone black, as if struck by lightning, but tens of meters deep? Some researchers speculated on an ancient meteorite, others on a gas explosion from underground voids. The Bedouin living nearby merely shook their heads and declared the place cursed. At night, the desert around Ubar seems alive. The sand rises and swirls, as if whispering something in an ancient language. People who have been there report seeing flashes above the sand at night and hearing sounds like metallic clanging underground. One expedition member wrote in his diary that he felt a slight vibration under his feet, as if an invisible mechanism were at work somewhere deep below. Of course, the official explanation was optical illusions, fatigue, and the effects of the heat. But the atmosphere of Ubar itself seems to defy explanation. When photographs of the ruins were released, many scholars acknowledged that the city they had discovered could indeed be the one that inspired the legends. The remains of fortifications, ancient roads, traces of trade routes, everything matched. But the more they discovered, the more questions arose. Who built these towers in the middle of a barren desert, devoid of water and life? Why were the wall materials different from the surrounding stone? And most importantly, what exactly caused the city to vanish so suddenly? Today, Ubar is a place where no roads lead. Its coordinates are known, but the sands have once again sealed the entrances. Occasionally, the wind reveals fragments of the walls, but after a few days, everything is buried again. Thus, the desert guards its secret, preventing anyone from getting too close. Perhaps that's why it's still spoken of in whispers, not as an archaeological site, but as a reminder that even the most powerful cities can vanish overnight. leaving only an echo in the sand which no one can decipher. Book of Rohans. In the early 19th century, an object appeared in a small Hungarian village that immediately disturbed the peace of archivists and historians. It was a book woven from incomprehensible symbols, drawings, and glyphs that did not exist in any known language. The paper was yellowed, the binding was cracked, but the strangest thing was hidden inside. Not a single word in this book was legible. It seemed to speak to the world in a language forgotten even before the advent of writing. The book was named after the place where it was found, Rohank. More than 400 pages are covered with thousands of symbols resembling neither runes, nor Arabic, nor Cyrillic. Each line is carefully written as if the author wrote not at random, but according to strict rules. Among the text are dozens of drawings, crosses, stars, scenes of wars, and prayers. Sometimes there are figures dressed in clothing that did not exist in Europe. These images are simultaneously familiar and alien, as if they were drawn by someone who had seen another world. Scholars attempted to at least understand its structure. The text is written from right to left. The characters are repeated but without any pattern. Some pages resemble prayers, others military chronicles, but deciphering them proved impossible. Even modern cryptographers admitted, if it is a cipher, it is constructed according to a principle unknown to humanity. Then a hypothesis arose that the book is a forgery. It was claimed that someone in the 19th century wanted to play a trick on the academics by creating a pseudo-ancient artifact. But analysis of the paper revealed that it is older than previously thought, dating from a time before Europe had mass-produced printing. Some researchers claimed the text was written in an extinct dialect of ancient Hungarian peoples. Others believed it was the code of a sect hiding from church persecution. This was supported by illustrations depicting crescent moons and pagan symbols alongside crosses. Such a juxtaposition of religions in a single book seems impossible for the Middle Ages. But if this is not a joke or a fabrication, then we have before us evidence of an unknown faith that existed on the border of three worlds: Christianity, Islam, and ancient nature worship. Researchers were particularly drawn to illustrations depicting the sun and stars connected by lines. Some saw this as an encrypted calendar, others as a map. One page depicts a man with a glowing circle behind his head, holding not a cross, but something resembling an ancient device. This may be a hint at knowledge that disappeared with its creators. Attempts to decipher it continued for decades. The book passed from hand to hand, was lost, and then reappeared, as if choosing who was worthy to touch it. Scholars in various countries debated, what if this wasn't a cipher at all, but a transcription of a language that existed before known civilizations? Perhaps the author was simply recording thoughts, with no intention of them being understood. Then the text becomes not a code, but a reflection of consciousness, a monologue of a man speaking to himself through the centuries. Some pages are written too neatly, as if someone had written them with a ruler and considered each character sacred. One drawing depicts a figure standing against the backdrop of a ruined city. Above her is a symbol resembling an eye. This image has given rise to dozens of legends that the book describes the end of the world, as witnessed by its author. Others believe it is simply a collection of prayers written in a trance. Today, the Book of Rohank is kept under glass in a Hungarian library. Its pages have not been fully digitized, and the text is rarely published. Scholars attribute this to the need to preserve the paper. But among mystery enthusiasts, rumors circulate that certain fragments contain too many similarities with biblical and Islamic stories. It's as if the book connects texts separated by millennia, and does so as if it knows their original origins. Every attempt to touch it leaves a feeling of unease. People who have worked with the original have described a strange sensation, as if the text were staring back. Perhaps because there is nothing familiar about it. No beginning, no end, no logic, no translatable meaning. Only symbols, repeated from century to century, like the breath of those who wish to be understood. The Book of Rohans remains the most enigmatic manuscript in Europe. In a world where any language can be deciphered, it alone defies both time and science. And as its pages lie in the shadows under glass, we can only guess whose thoughts they contain. A man, a prophet, or someone from a world we can't even imagine. White Pyramid of Shanxi. In northern China, amid the mountains and dusty plains of Shanxi province, stands a hill unlike any other. It appears to be an ordinary peak, covered in grass and sparse trees, but viewed from the air, its smooth edges and perfectly angled base become visible. It is here, according to eyewitnesses, that the White Pyramid lies hidden, one of the most enigmatic structures ever seen. Its story began not with an archaeologist, but with a pilot. In the spring of 1945, American pilot James Gaussman was on a mission transporting cargo across China. Engine trouble forced him to descend over the mountainous region west of Xi'an. It was then that he saw something below that shook him more than any military mission. In a valley surrounded by hills stood a gigantic pyramid, its white faces glistening in the sun. Its top seemed polished like marble, and its four sides met at an angle perfect to the last degree. The pilot described it as a structure larger than the pyramids of Egypt and swore it was not a mirage. 2 years later, another pilot, Maurice Shahan, flying over the same area, confirmed the sighting. He managed to take several blurry black and white photographs, which indeed showed a gigantic pyramid standing in the middle of the valley. When the photographs appeared in the newspapers, the world began talking about a Chinese Atlantis. Scientists, politicians, and journalists demanded an explanation. But Chinese authorities soon closed the area to all research, declaring that there were no pyramids there, and that the structures seen were merely ancient burial sites. Since then, the mystery has only deepened. Satellite images from the late 20th century once again revealed that the area around Xi'an does indeed contain several pyramidal hills, arranged in a specific pattern. Some reach heights of over 100 meters. They are covered with grass and trees to prevent them from collapsing, but beneath the surface lie smooth layers of stone. The largest of these is called the White Hill, after a legend about its luminous appearance. Locals claim that it was once lined with white slabs of limestone or clay that reflected the sun's rays, causing the entire valley to glow. But now, nothing remains of that brilliance, only the deafening silence of the soil and a prohibition that no one dares to disturb. According to ancient Chinese chronicles, these lands house the tombs of emperors of the Xia and Shang dynasties, who lived thousands of years before the Common Era. However, the size and shape of the White Pyramid do not correspond to known funerary traditions. It is too large, its orientation aligns with the alignment of certain stars, and its apex faces the constellation Orion. Some researchers have suggested that it is not a tomb, but an ancient observatory or even the center of an unknown cult that existed long before the emergence of Chinese civilization. During one of the unofficial expeditions, archaeologists who reached the base of the pyramid discovered pieces of white clay, sintered as if they had been fired at incredible temperatures. Nearby were shards of pottery not dating to any known era. The foundation stones appeared to have been filled with a mortar that had not deteriorated over thousands of years. All of this contradicted the conventional logic of ancient construction. However, official reports of these discoveries were never published. Many scholars believe the authorities are deliberately concealing information. In a country where respect for ancestors is sacred, excavations of imperial tombs are considered an insult. Some believe that beneath the White Pyramid lies not just a tomb, but an entire complex of chambers connected by tunnels to other structures in the region. However, entry is impossible, the area is guarded, and any research without permission is prohibited. Even modern Chinese archaeologists admit they have no access to these sites. Interestingly, several smaller pyramids are located near the White Pyramid, forming a symmetrical pattern reminiscent of a star map. If you connect their lines, you get a geometric figure remarkably similar to the arrangement of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. This analogy has given rise to dozens of hypotheses about ancient cultural connections, and the possible exchange of knowledge between East and West long before written history. But there is no confirmation, and each new photograph only adds to the confusion. Some researchers theorize about an antediluvian civilization that existed in China long before the first dynasties. They believe the White Pyramid could be a remnant of this forgotten era, not a tomb, but a technical structure, possibly an energy source. Proponents of this theory point to magnetic anomalies recorded near the pyramids and strange deviations in compass needles. However, mainstream science rejects such data, attributing them to natural fluctuations in the magnetic field. The local legends are far simpler, and at the same time, more terrifying. They say the pyramid holds the soul of the heavenly emperor, and if disturbed, the wind that carries away cities will return to Earth. Elderly people from the surrounding villages avoid approaching the hill after sunset. They say a faint glow rises above it at night, as if the surface reflects moonlight. and sometimes a rumble, like distant thunder, can be heard. In recent years, satellite images have confirmed the existence of over 100 pyramids in Shanxi, but the White Pyramid remains the largest and most inaccessible. Its precise coordinates are not officially published, and international expeditions are prohibited. Even images taken by foreign satellites are often blurry, as if someone is deliberately concealing details. What does this hill conceal? The secret of an imperial dynasty, or the memory of people who lived before the advent of writing? Perhaps the answer has long awaited beneath a layer of clay and sand, but, as it did thousands of years ago, it remains elusive. The White Pyramid of Shanxi is more than just an archaeological site. It symbolizes the boundary between knowledge and silence, between the past we strive to understand and the past that chooses whether to be revealed. And while the wind carries dust over its summit, this boundary remains unshakable, like the shadow of an ancient world hidden underground. Black Sarcophagus of Alexandria. In the summer of 2018, Egyptian construction workers digging the foundation for an ordinary building on El Karakli Street in Alexandria stumbled upon something that immediately changed the course of their work. 5 meters below the surface, a massive block of black granite emerged from the ground. It was enormous, unmarked, unadorned, and without even a hint of its owner. When archaeologists arrived at the site, they realized they were standing before one of the most enigmatic discoveries of the century. The sarcophagus's size was astounding. 2 meters 70 long, almost 2 meters high, about 1.5 meters wide, and weighing over 30 tons. The stone was intact, without cracks, as if centuries of dust hadn't touched its surface. An alabaster bust was found nearby, devoid of a face, as if someone had deliberately erased its features. It looked as if someone had tried to hide, not the body, but the very existence of the buried person. When news of the discovery spread around the world, thousands of people followed every detail. Social media was ablaze with speculation. Some said it was the tomb of Alexander the Great, whose body had disappeared from the records since ancient times. Some claimed the sarcophagus was cursed and forbidden to be opened. Others suggested that ancient knowledge, capable of revolutionizing our understanding of the world, was hidden inside. Egyptian authorities couldn't simply ignore the uproar. They set a date for the opening, and the entire world froze. The operation proved more difficult than expected. The sarcophagus lid was sealed with ancient mortar, and the weight of the granite required the use of heavy machinery. The workers braced themselves for a possible gas leak or outbreak of ancient bacteria. When the lid was finally lifted, an unbearable stench filled the air. Warm steam rose from within, and everyone standing nearby recoiled. Inside, there was no gold jewelry, no inscriptions, nothing but a thick, reddish-brown liquid and 3 decomposed skeletons. This scene became a symbol of both disappointment and horror. It turned out that water had seeped inside over the millennia and mixed with the remains. But the oddity persisted. Why was a sarcophagus of such size used for 3 bodies? Why was there no inscription nearby, even though the Egyptians always noted the names of the deceased? Research revealed that the remains belonged to 2 men and a woman, likely from the same family or close circle. One of the skulls bore signs of a strong blow, possibly death in battle, but who they were remained a mystery. When samples of the liquid were sent to laboratories, a new wave of rumors erupted. Some Egyptians claimed it contained ancient power and wrote petitions to be allowed to drink the sarcophagus's water. The authorities were forced to issue an official statement, warning that it was mortally dangerous. The world, which only yesterday had been waiting for the solution to Alexander's mystery, now gazed upon the black coffin with bewilderment and fear. The researchers found no amulets or ritual objects. Even the sarcophagus's material seemed unusual. Granite brought from Aswan, more than 800 kilometers to the south. Such transportation would have required enormous effort, as each block weighed more than the ancient barges could support. Why expend so much effort burying nameless people? Some Egyptologists have suggested that the sarcophagus was made for a nobleman, but never used. Others believe it contained victims of ritual punishment, perhaps participants in a conspiracy whose names were erased from memory. But none of these theories explain why the sarcophagus was so carefully sealed and hidden so deeply, as if an attempt was made to isolate it from the world. Another theory is that the sarcophagus may have been reused. Its original contents were removed, and new bodies were placed inside, with care taken to leave no trace. This would explain the lack of inscriptions and the strangely compacted mortar at the seams. However, this hypothesis only adds to the confusion. Today, the sarcophagus is kept in the Egyptian Museum in Alexandria, closed to visitors. Scientists continue to analyze the composition of the granite, mortar, and metal particles found inside, but no study has shed light on the mystery of its origin. Some experts believe the sarcophagus was crafted not by Hellenistic Egyptian craftsmen, but by an older culture. The shapes, angles, and proportions do not correspond to known traditions. Locals believe the sarcophagus belonged not to humans, but to the gods. Something about its shape is truly disturbing. The lid is slightly curved, as if designed to withstand pressure from within, and the interior surface is polished so perfectly, as if machine-honed. The sand found beneath the sarcophagus shows signs of melting, as if the site had once been subjected to intense heat. Sometimes at night, workers involved in the excavations report strange dreams. They hear the sound of footsteps underground, as if someone were walking beneath the sarcophagus, restless. Perhaps it's just a shadow of fatigue, but many of them refuse to return to similar projects after those excavations. The Black Sarcophagus of Alexandria is more than just an archaeological find. It's a reminder that even the simplest stones can hold stories best left undiscovered. Its nameless inhabitants remain voiceless, but their tomb itself continues to pose questions no one dares answer. What if it truly wasn't made for humans? What if the one who lay within was merely the keeper of a secret the granite still guards from our eyes? And perhaps that's precisely why Alexandria has once again become a city where history meets myth, and where every step on the earth echoes an ancient breath rising from a depth where one shouldn't gaze for too long. Pyramids of Sudan. Among the silent dunes of the Nubia Desert, where the sun burns the horizon white, stand pyramids that almost no one talks about. They are smaller than the Egyptian ones, but there are more than 100 of them, and each one was built with a precision that astounds the eye. This is the kingdom of Meroe, the capital of the vanished Kushite kingdom, once a rival to the pharaohs, whose power extended for hundreds of kilometers along the Nile. Here, in the sand, lies a history that upends our conventional understanding of the ancient world. The pyramids of Sudan were discovered by explorers in the 19th century, but archaeologists long found it difficult to believe that these structures were not copies of Egyptian ones, but the creation of an independent civilization. They are over 2,000 years old, but the exact date of their construction remains unclear, as fragments of the inscriptions engraved on the walls are missing. The sand, as if alive, shifts every night, burying old tombs and revealing new ones. The wind here is not just wind, it is a keeper of secrets. Each pyramid is built of reddish stone and is distinguished by steep, almost acute angles. Unlike Egyptian monuments, the apices of these pyramids do not point precisely north. Their builders followed a different, unknown geometry. It may have been based on a system of stars long since vanished from the sky. At the entrances, the remains of temples are visible, adorned with images of gods known to no other religion. Bas-reliefs depict people with tall headdresses, and above them hang symbols of the sun and lions, the emblem of kings who ruled with stern, noble strength. Many tombs were looted in ancient times. There are signs of forced entry, collapsed ceilings, empty niches where gold vessels once stood. But in some pyramids, archaeologists have found things that cannot be explained. For example, stone figurines with features that are neither African nor Eastern, or vessels made of a material that defies analysis, an alloy not found in nature. The most puzzling discovery, small tablets with inscriptions written in symbols not found in any African alphabet. These symbols are repeated on the walls of various pyramids, as if they were an ancient message left for those who would one day return. The fate of Meroe is tragic. It was once a center of trade between the Nile and the Red Sea, a source of gold, ivory, and stone. Coins were minted here, roads were built, and unique rituals were created. But suddenly the city became deserted. Scholars debate the cause: war, a change in the river's course, or a curse as told in local legends. Elders say the inhabitants of Meroe grew arrogant and attempted to build towers higher than the clouds to hear the voices of the gods. Then the earth trembled beneath them, and since then, anyone who approaches the tombs with disrespect hears a dull thud beneath their feet, as if someone who is not forgiven is speaking from beneath the earth. In the 20th century, several expeditions attempted to excavate the Central Pyramid, where, according to legend, King Arkamani was buried. But strange coincidences plagued the explorers. One engineer died in a sand avalanche, another fell ill with a rare disease. After this, the excavations were suspended. Egyptologists dismiss these incidents as coincidences, but locals still avoid the pyramids at dawn, believing that a dim flame burns above them at night, like the breath of ancient kings. Today, the site of Meroe seems forgotten. Sand covers the stones as if time itself is trying to hide its traces. But photographs from space reveal much more hidden beneath the surface. Entire streets, squares, and possibly underground passages. Scientists say it may have been more than just a necropolis, but a city built according to the principles of the constellations. Each pyramid a star, each road a line in the sky. If this is true, then the ancient inhabitants of Sudan possess knowledge that even the builders of Giza lacked. The most astonishing sensation comes when you stand among these pyramids. The air is thick, hot, filled with the ringing of invisible metal. No birds, no wind, only absolute silence. The stones seem to absorb your gaze, and it seems as if the eyes of those who once ruled here are peering out from the depths. This feeling is indescribable. It's closer to the realization that you're standing in a place where the earth still remembers the footsteps of the gods. Today, Sudan is rarely a tourist destination, and so Meroe remains virtually untouched. Unlike Egypt, there are no crowds, guards, or flashy signs. Just sand and ancient walls stretching into infinity. Sometimes at sunrise, the white tops of the pyramids glow, as if reflecting rays from another time. Perhaps that's why the locals say, these pyramids breathe, and when the last ray of sunlight touches their summit, they will once again open a gateway to the past. Meroe is more than just an archaeological site. It's a reminder that civilizations vanish not from time, but from their own hubris, that the secret of ancient Sudan lies not in gold, but in how easily history can turn to sand. Every step among these pyramids is a step in the footsteps of a people who wanted to be eternal, but instead became nothing more than a whisper on the wind, scattered over the Nile. Nazca Plateau. In southern Peru, where stone becomes an extension of the sky, lies a desert plateau where the earth itself has become a book. Thousands of lines, giant animal figures, arrows, spirals, and straight lines, stretching for tens of kilometers, cover the plain as if someone had drawn its surface from thin air. This is Nazca, one of the most enigmatic mysteries on the planet, a place where ancient people left a message that no one can decipher to this day. When planes first flew over this desert in the 1920s, pilots couldn't believe their eyes. From above, images of a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, a snake, a llama, and even a human figure with enormous eyes became visible. Each line was carved with astonishing precision. Just a few meters wide, but some were over 20 kilometers long. And most importantly, they could only be seen from above. From the ground, the drawings were almost invisible, as if their creators never intended for them to be seen by the public. Scientists have tried to explain how such grandiose figures could have been drawn without modern tools. The plateau's surface is covered in dark stone, beneath which lies light clay. When the top layer is removed, a white line appears. But how the ancient inhabitants achieved perfect symmetry, maintaining proportions for kilometers around, remains a mystery. No traces of structures or watchtowers have been found nearby. Everything appears as if these lines were drawn overnight, with a precision impossible for human hands. There are many theories about who created these geoglyphs and why. Some see them as a giant calendar, others as a map of underground waters. Still others believe the Nazca Plateau is a point of contact between heaven and earth, a kind of ancient airfield for the gods. This theory is supported by the shapes of some of the figures, long stripes leading to a single point, like runways. But skeptics argue that this is just a coincidence, a figment of the imagination and the desert wind. In the mid-20th century, German researcher Maria Reiche devoted her life to studying the Nazca lines. She measured the lines by hand, drew diagrams, and slept in a tent in the desert. She believed they were an astronomical calendar. Each figure indicated the movement of the sun, moon, and stars. But no single explanation could explain all the images. Some lines are aligned with sunrise, others with sunset, and still others don't align with any known direction. There's another hypothesis. Some archaeologists believe the lines are traces of ritual processions. People walked along them, performing ceremonies for the rain gods. After all, the Nazca region was one of the driest on Earth, and life there would have been impossible without water. However, this theory also fails to answer the main question. Why create such large-scale figures if no one could see them? Over time, the Nazca Plateau has become the scene of debate between science and mysticism. Archaeologists have found underground remains of pottery, bones, and altars containing offerings. Everything points to the site having sacred significance. But in recent decades, new lines have been spotted in satellite images that do not correspond to the known figures. They are longer, smoother, as if drawn by a more precise hand. This has raised new questions. Were all the lines created by a single culture, or were different peoples active at this site, separated by time? The Nazca Plateau appears lifeless, but at sunset, it comes alive. The stones heat up and begin to glow with a soft glow, creating the illusion of movement. From a drone's perspective, the designs resemble a starry sky fallen to Earth. Perhaps this is precisely what the ancient masters were aiming for, to unite the sky and the sand so that the Celestials could see their way home. Some researchers claim the figures are arranged in a specific order, reflecting mathematical principles known only to modern engineers. The monkey's proportions correspond to the number pi to 3 decimal places, and the angles of the hummingbird's wings follow the solar calendar. This cannot be explained by simple observation. How could a people who lived without writing have such precision? Locals still consider the Nazca Plateau sacred. They believe the lines connect the world of the living and the world of spirits. When a rare rain falls over the desert, the water flows through the ancient channels and forms patterns, as if the earth itself comes to life. At these moments, the lines seem to move, and the shadow of someone returning home after 1,000 years of slumber passes over them. Today, the plateau is guarded, but even satellites cannot reveal its secret. No matter how many maps scientists draw, new lines continue to appear, as if someone is invisibly writing history. Some say it's the result of erosion, others that hundreds more figures lie beneath the sand, awaiting their time. The Nazca Plateau is more than just an archaeological puzzle. It's a mirror in which man sees the limits of his knowledge. Everything that seems random to us here becomes a pattern. Everything we call a mystery becomes part of the design. And perhaps one day, when the wind has completely erased the traces of our cities, these lines will still be visible. A reminder that those who lived on Earth spoke to the sky in a language understood only by the stars. Celtic Circle of Callanish. On the west coast of Scotland, where the land meets the cold sea, stands a place where the wind sounds like music and the stones resemble frozen sentinels. Among the hills of the Isle of Lewis, gray boulders rise in perfect order. They are called Callanish, a Celtic stone circle over 5,000 years old. It predates Stonehenge and may have been its prototype. But no one knows who, when, or why erected these stones at the edge of the world, where the sun hardly sets in summer and hardly rises in winter. Callanish consists of 13 upright stones arranged in a circle and a long walkway of 12 stones leading to its center. A central monolith stands within, like an axis connecting earth and sky. Surrounded by hills, mists, and the hum of the wind, it seems as if time has stood still here. Each stone is covered in moss and lichen, but their position has remained unchanged since the time when mammoths still walked this land. Scientists claim the circle was used as an observatory. On the summer solstice, the sun rises precisely between the two stones, and on the winter solstice, it disappears below the horizon at the opposite point. But this is only one version. Local legends say that Callanish was erected not by humans, but by giants who were petrified when they refused to bow to the new faith. Another belief holds that the stones are gateways to the spirit world, and every summer solstice, the shadow of the main stone points to a place where the voices of ancestors can be heard. At night, Callanish seems alive. The stones whisper as the wind passes through them, and the stars reflect in the puddles, forming mirrors where the past and present merge. Tourists report hearing a hum, like a low ringing, emanating directly from the earth. Scientists attribute this to wind vibrations and the specific arrangement of the stones. But the feeling remains, as if someone underground is actually responding. Some researchers suggest that Callanish was not just a place of worship, but part of a vast megalithic system connecting several islands. If their location is plotted on a map, They form lines that align with the movements of the sun and moon. This means the ancient builders possessed astronomical knowledge that people of that time should not have possessed. How did they calculate angles and distances with such precision, even if writing didn't yet exist? Callanish differs from other stone circles in that its center is aligned not only with the sun, but also with the stars. Modern calculations have shown that thousands of years ago, one of the lines coincided with the constellation Draco. Perhaps the ancients believed that this was where their gods originated. This idea seems fanciful, but a closer look at the design reveals that it is too perfect to be a coincidence. Archaeologists found traces of an ancient burial beneath the central stone. A man, whose remains had been charred by fire, was buried in the ground, surrounded by pieces of quartz. This mineral was believed to connect the worlds of the living and the dead. Perhaps the circle was erected around this burial as a beacon for the soul so it could return to heaven. Locals still hold Callanish in high esteem. At dawn, elders come here, bringing bread or water to the stones and leaving juniper branches. They don't say why they do this. It's simply a matter of ancient custom. And when the sun touches the tops of the stones, the air fills with warmth, as if the stones truly come to life. Scientists have tried to determine the origin of the megaliths, but the stone they are made of is not found nearby. This means the blocks were transported from afar, perhaps by water. Each one weighs several tons, and without modern machinery, this would seem impossible. But the builders of Callanish did it. Their efforts weren't just labor, they were a ritual addressed to the heavens. Many believe Callanish is a place of power. Tourists report feeling a slight pressure in their chests when standing in the center of the circle, and instruments detecting faint magnetic fluctuations. Perhaps this is a natural phenomenon, but the impression remains mystical. Everything about this place seems designed not for a practical purpose, but to connect with something beyond human understanding. When the sun sets behind the hills, Callanish is plunged into semi-darkness. The stones become like living beings, silently observing people. It seems as if you turn away, and they will move, returning to their ancient places of power. This feeling accompanies everyone who has been here, as if time here does not flow, but breathes. Callanish is more than just an ancient monument. It's a reminder of how people searched for meaning between heaven and earth. There's no gold here, no inscriptions, and no answers. Only stones, shadows, and the endless wind that carries over them the same word, repeated for millennia. Remember, Kailasa Temple. In the heart of the Indian state of Maharashtra, amid the cliffs of Ellora, stands a temple that defies explanation. It's carved entirely from a single mountain, not built, but carved out of the rock, as if someone had stripped the mountain of its excess until all that remained was the temple. This is Kailasa, one of the most incredible creations ever created by human hands, and perhaps not only by human hands. The temple is dedicated to the god Shiva, but its shape, proportions, and symmetry astound even modern engineers. The structure is over 30 meters high and nearly 80 meters long. All of this is not assembled from blocks, but carved from top to bottom into a monolithic basalt rock. Scientists estimate that approximately 200,000 tons of stone had to be removed to create the temple, with no trace of errors or alterations. There is not a single document explaining how this was accomplished. Even with modern technology, such work would have taken decades, but according to legend, the temple was completed in a matter of years. Legends say the temple was born from the prayer of a queen who vowed to build a sanctuary if her husband were cured of his illness. She promised to build it before the sun rose over the mountains. When the night ended, the temple was already standing. The monks of Ellora recounted that the builders didn't cut the stone, but pulled it with chanting and the vibrations of instruments. And while this sounds like a myth, there are indeed traces of vibrational patterns in the walls, as if someone had carved the rock with sound. Archaeologists searched for tool marks. In some areas, lines resembling machine work are visible, even parallel and perfectly deep. Such marks could not have been made by a standard hammer or chisel. Researchers hypothesized that the craftsmen used primitive metal tools, but that would explain the clean lines and lack of cracks. If the blows had been applied by hand, the stone would have crumbled. However, the temple is smooth, as if polished. There's a hypothesis that Kailasa was built not as a simple temple, but as a symbol of the celestial Mount Meru, the center of the universe, which, according to Indian mythology, connects earth and heaven. Perhaps the builders were attempting to recreate this celestial image on earth. Every detail has sacred significance. The staircases lead not simply upward, but toward the stars, and the columns are arranged in a pattern that aligns with the movements of the planets. Some Indian scholars argue that Kailasa is not architecture, but frozen music embodied in stone. Modern researchers have attempted to reconstruct the construction technology using computer models, but even with laser equipment, replicating the geometry proved impossible. The temple's symmetry is perfect, and its proportions correspond to the golden ratio. All of this makes one wonder how people of that time could have possessed knowledge so far beyond their time. A strange silence reigns inside the temple. Even the sound of footsteps is lost, as if absorbed by the walls. Figures of gods, lions, and elephants supporting the roof are carved into the gloom. Some of them seem alive. Their eyes seem to move in the torchlight. Scientists attribute this effect to the peculiarities of the lighting, but the impression remains. Kailasa breathes. When the rainy season arrives, water trickles down the temple walls like silver threads. On these days, locals believe Shiva emerges from his stone dwelling and blesses the earth. At this time, the temple resounds. Drops of water falling on the stone create a rhythm reminiscent of the breathing of a living being, and it's worth standing there for even a moment to understand that everything around was built not simply for faith, but for communion with something eternal. Some researchers believe Kailash stood long before the known kingdoms. Perhaps the builders merely revived the work of an ancient culture, traces of which had been erased by time. Ground-penetrating radar data indicate that there are indeed cavities beneath the temple, a network of tunnels and chambers extending deep into the mountain, but the entrance is closed. Any excavation attempts are met with collapses. It's as if the rock itself guards its secret. Kailasa remains a mystery even to those who live nearby. Monks say it's not a temple, but a gateway. Those who understand its harmony will be able to hear the earth vibrate and understand the language of stone. Perhaps this is the meaning of Kailasa, a reminder that true power lies not in building, but in liberating. And as the sun sets on the cliffs of Ellora, the temple continues to glow softly with gold, as if the stone itself remembers the hands of those who, without words, created a living silence in the mountain. Baalbek. In the mountains of Lebanon, where fog clings to the rocks and the air smells of ancient dust, stands a place that evokes equal parts awe and fear. On the Baalbek Plateau, among the ruins of Roman temples, lie stones that no one can explain. They are called the Stones of the Gods, giant blocks weighing over 1,000 tons, carved and placed with a precision unattainable even today. No theory explains who, when, or how managed to lift these boulders, each heavier than a passenger plane. Baalbek is known as the ancient city of Heliopolis, the City of the Sun. Majestic temples erected here by the Romans in honor of Jupiter, Venus, and Bacchus stood here, but the foundations on which they stand are much older. Beneath the Roman columns, blocks are visible that evoke another era. These stones are too large to be moved even by the most powerful cranes of the ancient world. They form a platform, a terrace, perfectly flat, as if carved from the molds of future engineers. The most famous of these blocks is the so-called Southern Stone. It's nearly 21 meters long, 4 meters high, and 5 meters wide. Its weight is estimated to exceed 1,200 tons. It lies in a quarry near the main temple, as if it had never been moved. But how was it carved from the rock and why? There's no answer. Even modern construction cranes can only lift half that weight. Some researchers suggest that ancient craftsmen used a system of levers, rollers, and ropes. But calculations show that moving even one block would require more than 40,000 people, coordinating their efforts in perfect synchrony. This seems impossible, especially since the surfaces of the blocks are polished, and the joints between them are so precise that not even a knife blade can fit between the stones. There are other oddities too. Magnetic instruments detect anomalies directly above the stones. The compass behaves unpredictably, the needle trembling. In some places, a weak electric field is observed, as if energy still flows within the stones. Geologists have discovered that the stones are composed of limestone, but their density is higher than that of ordinary rock. It's as if the material has undergone a heat treatment that ancient people couldn't have performed. Local legends link Baalbek to Baal, the ancient god of thunder and the sun. According to legend, his servants erected a stairway to heaven here, along which the gods descended to earth. The giant stones are said to have been gifted from heaven and not man-made. Some legends claim that a temple stood on this site where one could hear the voice of the stone, a low hum emanating from the earth itself. Modern researchers who have recorded infrasound on the plateau have indeed detected frequencies capable of causing anxiety and tremors in humans. During the time of Alexander the Great, priests came here to speak with the stars. They said that at night, the plateau was illuminated not by the moon, but by a strange cold light, as if a faint glow emanated from the surface. Modern geophysicists explain this by the reflection of moonlight off crystalline inclusions in the limestone, but legend outlives science. In the first half of the 20th century, German archaeologists attempted to measure all the blocks in detail and proved that the Romans may have used primitive rollers. However, the excavations only added to the mystery. Beneath the main temple of Jupiter, even older stone layers were discovered, extending into the ground. These blocks were even larger and perfectly fitted. This led many to believe that Baalbek was not a Roman creation, but a reconstruction of a much older structure. Some archaeologists call Baalbek the megalithic hub of the planet. Situated almost in line with Giza and Stonehenge, proponents of geodetic theories believe it could have been part of a network of ancient energy points. But even if this is a coincidence, it is astonishing. All these sites are linked by a common geometry, precise proportions and orientation to the sun. It has been suggested that Baalbek was an ancient spaceport. This theory is supported not only by ufologists, but also by engineers who have studied the plateau's structure. The stone platform is perfectly level, and its surface would have withstood enormous pressure. However, no traces of machinery or any other evidence have been found. Yet, the feeling that these stones once served something greater remains. Today, Baalbek attracts not only tourists, but also those seeking traces of ancient knowledge. Standing at the foot of the gigantic columns, you feel the air around you vibrate with the strain of centuries. The stones don't seem dead. They seem to preserve the memory of how the earth conversed with the sky. It's hard to believe that these boulders were carved by people who lived without steel, without machines, without blueprints. At night, the plateau falls silent. Only the wind passes between the columns, filling them with a low hum. And at that moment, it seems as if the breath of something ancient is truly rising from the depths of the earth, something that witnessed the beginning of time and waits for us to learn to listen again. Baalbek remains a monument to the impossible, proof that human history may be but a fragment of a far greater and forgotten vision. Stone spheres of Costa Rica. In the Central American jungles, where the air is thick with moisture and the birds call as if they're keeping track of time, lie dozens of stone spheres, perfectly round, smooth, and incomprehensibly precise. They're found in various parts of southern Costa Rica, primarily in the Diquís River Delta, and each one seems to have been crafted by hands that understand geometry better than any engineer. These spheres are a mystery that no one can explain to this day. The first mention of them appeared in the 1930s, when workers clearing forests for banana plantations stumbled upon dozens of stone spheres. Some were the size of soccer balls, others reached 3 meters in diameter and weighed over 16 tons. All were perfectly spherical. People who had never seen anything like it initially assumed it was a natural phenomenon, but geologists quickly realized that such shapes could not have arisen by chance. Researchers determined that the spheres were carved from granodiorite and sandstone, rocks found several kilometers from where they were found. This means that someone not only crafted these stones, but also transported them across rivers and hills without metal or machinery. Furthermore, many of the spheres showed signs of polishing, as if they had been polished to a mirror finish. Modern measurements show that the deviation from the ideal shape is less than 2 millimeters, a precision that even industrial machines sometimes fail to achieve. But why? There's no answer. Some archaeologists believe the spheres served as symbols of power, marking the domains of ancient leaders. Others see astronomical significance in them. If you connect lines between certain groups of spheres, they point to the sunrise on the equinoxes. Still others believe they were part of a ritual complex, with each sphere representing a star or planet. Local legends offer a different story. Elders of the Brai-Bris tribe say the balls belong to the thunder gods, who hurled them from the sky to cleanse the earth of evil. When the thunder died down, the stones fell and remained where the lightning had stopped. Even today, locals avoid touching the balls unnecessarily, believing that a spirit sleeps within each one. During excavations, archaeologists found several spheres buried in groups of exactly 3, forming triangles. The distance between them was uniform, If these points were plotted on a map, their lines would form an exact model of the Orion constellation. Whether this is a coincidence or not, no one knows. But even skeptics admit the placement is no accident. Interestingly, no American culture has preserved any mention of those who could have made them. No drawings, no inscriptions, no legends. It's as if the people who created the spheres suddenly disappeared, leaving no trace. Scientists date them to approximately 1,000 years ago, but some researchers believe they may be much older, perhaps from an era when the region's climate was quite different. Many of the spheres were damaged or destroyed. When they were first discovered, workers blew up some of them in hopes of finding gold inside. However, nothing but stone was found. In a few cases, voids were indeed found inside, but these turned out to be natural cavities, not hiding places. Nevertheless, the phenomenon did not disappear. On the contrary, it became even more mysterious. In the 2000s, some of the spheres were officially added to the UNESCO World Heritage List. They were collected in a protected area, but many still lie in the jungle, half buried in the ground. Some are so covered in moss and vines that they resemble the eyes of the earth, peering out from the depths of time. There's a theory that the ideal shape of the spheres serves not an aesthetic, but an energetic purpose. Ancient cultures believed that the sphere was the perfect form, containing the energy of the universe. Perhaps these stones were created as repositories of power or ritual landmarks. Some researchers claim that compasses behave strangely near them, and electronics malfunction. Official science doesn't confirm such data, but the phenomenon attracts the attention of physicists, geologists, and esotericists. Today, when you stand among these stones, you feel a special tension. They are silent, but their presence is palpable. At night, the moon reflects off the smooth surfaces, making them seem to breathe. The wind passes between them, creating a sound like a low hum. People who have been there say the spheres seem to respond to their footsteps, emitting barely audible vibrations. The stone spheres of Costa Rica are more than just an archaeological mystery. They are a reminder that even without metal and machines, humans once knew how to create perfect forms, guided not by calculations, but by intuition, or perhaps by a knowledge we have lost. Whoever created these spheres understood something that eludes the modern mind. And when you look at them in the rain, as drops trickle down their perfectly smooth sides, it seems as if the stones are alive, and perhaps simply waiting for humanity to remember why they were carved from the heart of the earth. Derinkuyu, in southern Turkey, in the heart of ancient Cappadocia, beneath silent hills and lava cliffs, lies a city that sees no sun. It's called Derinkuyu, a place where streets, temples, and wells, crafted by unknown masters, stretch underground. Here, deep within the earth, one can descend 18 levels and never emerge to the surface. This city is unlike any other. It seems to have been built not for habitation, but for salvation. The story of the discovery began by chance. In the 1960s, a peasant from a Turkish village, while breaking down a wall in the basement of his house, stumbled upon a void. Beyond it, a passageway opened into the unknown. When light entered the resulting opening, stone corridors, steps, and arches appeared in the depths. Thus, an entrance to the ancient city was discovered beneath his house. It was later discovered that there are dozens of such entrances, all connected by an underground network of tunnels extending deep underground. Derinkuyu descends more than 60 meters. It contains kitchens, wineries, wells, storage facilities, bedrooms, schools, and even chapels. Some halls could accommodate up to 2,000 people. The air underground is cool, and the walls are smooth, as if machine finished. Scientists have discovered that the ventilation system is so precisely designed that even at the lowest levels, a flow of fresh air is maintained. The entire city breathes, despite being windowless. Archaeologists believe Derinkuyu was built by the Phrygians in the 2nd millennium BC, but the age of many sections does not match this date. The lower levels are clearly older than the upper ones. The walls there are made of hard tuff, so smoothly dressed that they bear no traces of primitive tools. Some tunnels extend toward neighboring cities and connect with them, forming an entire underground world. It is possible that a whole network of cities, connected by passages tens of kilometers long, is hidden beneath Cappadocia. The main mystery is why people needed to go underground. According to one theory, the inhabitants were fleeing invasions. But why build a shelter of such scale, designed to accommodate thousands of people and last for months? At Derinkuyu, ventilation shafts up to 80 meters deep, wells leading to underground water sources, and massive stone doors sliding along channels were discovered. These doors could seal the tunnels from the inside and withstand enormous loads. It's as if they were designed not for a human enemy, but for something that might come from outside. Some scholars have suggested that the city was intended to protect against disasters, perhaps volcanic eruptions or ashfall. However, the inhabitants of Cappadocia have always lived near active volcanoes and knew how to escape lava. Underground structures were unlikely to offer protection from heat and gases. Moreover, the city's architecture creates the impression of a permanent residence, not a temporary shelter. Derinkuyu contains areas for livestock, storage rooms, an oil press, and even wine vats. Everything is arranged as if people lived here for a long time and in peace. There's a theory that Derinkuyu was built as a defense against something coming from above. Cappadocian legends tell of times when the sky fell to the earth, and people retreated beneath the cliffs to escape the light. Perhaps these tales describe an ancient catastrophe, a meteorite impact, or a powerful solar storm. This theory is supported by a strange feature. The underground walls are melted in places, as if exposed to high temperatures. Archaeologists discovered images of creatures with elongated heads and round eyes, drawn with simple lines on one of the lower levels. Some believe they represent gods, others believe they reflect fear of enemies. But the figures' appearance is strange. They resemble neither humans nor animals. Their bodies are elongated, and their hands hold not weapons, but what appear to be glowing orbs. These images are carved into stone and covered in soot, indicating their antiquity. The most mysterious place is the high vaulted central hall. It contains a huge stone pillar, rising upward as if supporting the vault. Some believe it to be an ancient landmark, or part of a structure holding the vaults from collapsing. However, instruments show that the pillar is magnetic. A compass deviates near it. What lies beneath, no one knows. Excavations are prohibited, as the structure may be unstable. Today, Derinkuyu is open to visitors, but access is permitted only up to the 8th level. The rest remain closed, for reasons unknown. Locals claim there are chambers deeper down that no one dares to enter. They say a noise like the breathing of the earth can be heard there. Sometimes tourists report feeling a slight pressure in their ears, as if a thunderstorm were approaching, even though there is no wind underground. Derinkuyu remains one of the greatest archaeological mysteries. What people possess the knowledge to carve an entire city underground and provide it with ventilation and water remains unclear. All we know is that this city was built to survive, and its creators knew how to work with stone in a way we cannot. Perhaps Derinkuyu is more than just a shelter, but a memory of a time when the earth was no longer safe, and man first realized that salvation could be sought not in the sky, but in the depths. And while the air below remains fresh and the corridors breathe darkness, it seems as if the city is alive, just waiting for people to remember why they built it. They built it. Pyramids of Bosnia. In the center of Europe, in a valley near the Bosnian town of Visoko, rises a hill long considered an ordinary natural feature. But when local archaeologist Samir Osmanagic declared that he was looking at a pyramid hidden underground, a story began that divided the scientific world. Some called his discovery the greatest hoax of the century, while others saw it as proof that human history is much older than we thought. Today, Vysočina is known as the Pyramid of the Sun, and several similar formations have been discovered nearby, named Moon, Dragon, Love, and Earth. All of this has become the center of one of the most exciting archaeological mysteries of modern times. Osmanagic claims the structure beneath the hill is not natural. Its slopes form perfect triangles, oriented to the cardinal directions with astonishing precision. Beneath the topsoil, perfectly fitted stone blocks were discovered. Some weigh several tons and are stacked like bricks in ancient masonry. Furthermore, tunnels emerge from the pyramid's depths, narrow, dry, with smooth walls, as if they were carved by machine rather than shovels. Researchers who have explored the area have reported strange effects. The temperature there is always constant, around 15 degrees Celsius, and the air is fresh, despite the lack of visible ventilation. But the most astonishing thing was the energy measurements. At the top of the hill, instruments detected weak electromagnetic radiation traveling straight upward. It was uninterrupted even during thunderstorms and magnetic storms. Some scientists believe this is a natural phenomenon, while others believe the pyramid actually emits some kind of constant signal. Attempts were made to measure the background radiation, and it turned out to be lower than in the surrounding area, as if the rocks were filtering the radiation. All this only reinforced the feeling that something was hidden underground, operating according to unknown laws. Opponents of Osmanagich's theory argue that Vysochika Hill is a normal geological formation, and the blocks are natural sandstone layers shaped into slabs. They claim the pyramid's geometry is an illusion created by weathering. However, they were unable to explain the presence of underground passages. Many of them do indeed appear artificial. The walls are finished, the passages lead deeper, and a humming sound can be heard somewhere beneath them, as if some unknown mechanism were at work. When excavations began, enormous ceramic slabs, weighing up to several tons, were discovered. One of them was engraved with symbols resembling ancient runes. Radiocarbon dating showed the material to be over 10,000 years old. This contradicts the official history, as, according to academic science, humanity had barely begun to work stone at that time. But the fact remains. An object clearly crafted by hand was discovered underground. Researchers involved in the project claimed that the underground tunnel system was connected to the Bosna River and formed a network over 20 kilometers long. Some tunnels had been filled in manually, as if someone had intentionally sealed them. The reason for this is unknown. Perhaps the builders were trying to hide something from future generations, or perhaps they were simply preserving the city to be revisited one day. The most enigmatic part of the complex is a stone block dubbed the Ravna Monolith. It stands deep in the tunnel and is covered in a layer of dust and minerals. Instruments detect a weak electromagnetic field emanating from its center. When compasses and phones were turned on nearby, the devices began to work intermittently. Some claim to feel a slight vibration when touching the stone's surface. Skeptics attribute this to the geological properties of the rock, but this explanation doesn't negate the fact. The field is indeed present. Interest in the Bosnian pyramids hasn't waned over the years. Tourists, esotericists, scientists, and the simply curious come here. Some claim to feel a surge of strength and clarity, others to see dreams after visiting the tunnels. Archaeologists from various countries continue to debate whether this is a gigantic hoax or one of the most important discoveries of recent centuries, but the truth remains hidden beneath layers of clay and stone. There are also legends among the locals. They say that in ancient times, this valley was inhabited by people who could speak with the earth. They built temples not from stone, but from the mountain itself, believing that a true temple is one that grows from the earth, not stands on it. One night, according to the elders, the stars disappeared and a light descended from the sky, striking directly at the mountaintop. Afterward, heat erupted from the earth, and the people abandoned the valley. Since then, no one has lived here for long. Modern research using ground-penetrating radar has confirmed that regular-shaped cavities do indeed exist beneath Vysochika. In some places, they form rectangular chambers and galleries. A zone of increased conductivity was discovered in one area, suggesting the presence of metallic layers. However, no instrument has been able to penetrate deeper than 20 meters. The signal is lost, as if something is dampening it from within. The strangest thing is the pyramid's orientation. If you connect the apexes of the Sun, Moon, and Draco, you get an equilateral triangle whose sides point precisely north, south, and east. This precision is impossible without astronomical calculations. Moreover, the lines intersect at a point that coincides with ancient burial sites in the valley, as if the builders were creating not isolated structures, but a system united by a single idea. Osmanagich claims the pyramid was an energy device that converted earthly energy into vibrations. He was criticized, but measurements later conducted by independent specialists did indeed reveal the presence of electromagnetic currents directed strictly vertically. Where they come from, no one knows. All this makes the Bosnian pyramids a phenomenon that straddles the line between science and myth. If they are truly man-made, it means European history begins much earlier than is commonly believed. If they are a natural formation, then they are a miracle in themselves, so perfectly replicating the architecture of the ancient world. Today, the Visoko Valley has become a place where science and faith meet. Among the grasses and rocks, tourists hear birdsong, and beneath their feet, a hum like breathing. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, a faint glow rises above the pyramid. Scientists say it's a trick of the atmosphere, but locals whisper that it's the spirit of the ancient builders returning, checking to see if people have forgotten what was once built to connect heaven and earth. The Bosnian pyramids are a symbol of how mystery can force humanity to look to the past with new questions. Who built them, why, and how? So far, no answer has stood the test of time. This means the pyramid continues to do what it was perhaps created for, to hold the world's attention, forcing us to remember that not everything that appears to be a hill is actually earth. Sometimes it is the frozen heart of ancient knowledge, hidden by grass and silence. Crystal skulls of Central America. In the jungles of Belize, Mexico, and Honduras, where the humid air lingers with the scent of ancient fires, archaeologists and artifact hunters have been uncovering objects for decades that don't fit into any known era. These are crystal skulls, transparent, perfectly polished, and sculpted with such precision that even under a microscope, there are no tool marks on their surface. They don't belong to the Mayans, the Aztecs, or anyone else. But everyone who has seen them agrees on one thing. They look as if they weren't made by humans. The first skull to become famous was discovered in 1924. 9-year-old Anna Mitchell Hedges was accompanying her father, a British archaeologist, during excavations at the ancient city of Lubantun in Belize. As the sun was setting, a beam of light fell through a crack between the slabs, and the girl noticed a glint. A translucent human skull, carved from a single piece of rock crystal, emerged from the sand. It would later be called the Skull of Doom. The artifact weighed 5 kilograms, and its lower jaw was movable. It fit perfectly into the cranium, like a hinge in a modern mechanism. Scientists tried to determine the processing method, but they encountered the impossible. There are no cut marks, but under a microscope, lines are visible, as if the crystal had melted and solidified immediately in the desired shape. Modern lasers cannot replicate this process without overheating and damaging the structure. Moreover, quartz is comparable in hardness to granite, and it is impossible to process it manually without diamond-coated metal tools. But there are no traces of metal either. When specialists from Hewlett-Packard Laboratories began examining the skull, they confirmed that the artifact was made of the purest rock crystal, composed of 2 fused crystals, making it particularly difficult to work. Any careless movement would have destroyed the structure, but the skull was flawless. Furthermore, the crystal's optical axes were perfectly aligned so that light passing through the eye sockets was focused on the forehead. This effect creates the impression that the skull glows from within. But the story didn't end with one discovery. In the following decades, similar skulls were discovered in Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, and Brazil. Only about a dozen specimens are known, each unique in shape and size, but all crafted from crystal. Some are transparent, others smoky or with a slight pink tint. They all share one thing in common: the incredible quality of craftsmanship and the absence of tool marks. Mayan and Aztec legends claim that there were 13 crystal skulls created by the gods. When they are brought together, humanity will remember its origins. Perhaps this is a symbolic story, but a strange coincidence remains. There are indeed around 13 discovered artifacts, and no one has been able to prove their origin. The Mayan tribes themselves held skulls in reverence. Their myths say the first humans were created from transparent stone, and the gods breathed light into their bones. Perhaps these objects were symbols of memory or ritual instruments for communicating with ancestors. Some shamans claimed that when the light was held in a certain position, the skull produced a sound, a humming sound similar to breathing. Scientists attributed this to the vibration of air within the crystal, but those who have heard the sound claim it resembles a whisper. There are even more disturbing theories. In the early 20th century, American archaeologist Frederick Michel wrote that one of the skulls found in Mexico seemed to influence those nearby. People felt dizzy and disoriented, and instruments detected a weak electromagnetic field. Similar effects were also observed in Belize. Under certain lighting conditions, the crystal creates complex refractions of light, resembling internal flashes, as if it were moving. Some researchers see skulls as ancient information carriers. They believe the quartz structure is capable of storing energy and data, like modern microchips. If this is true, these crystals may indeed contain encrypted images and knowledge from a vanished civilization. But so far, no one has been able to read these records, and each skull remains a dead archive, awaiting someone who can find a way to hear its voice. Skeptics believe the skulls are 19th century forgeries created by European artisans. However, microcrack analysis shows that most are over 1,000 years old. Furthermore, some artifacts were found long before the technology capable of creating them existed. And why would Europeans create such complex objects from expensive materials if their meaning was understood only by Native Americans? Today, crystal skulls are scattered around the world. Some are kept in museums, others in private collections. One is in the British Museum, another in Paris, and several in Latin America. All are shrouded in silence. Scholars agree, their origin is unclear. But no one denies that these objects are real, and the person who created them possessed technology lost thousands of years ago. Today, shamans and esotericists gather in the caves of Belize and perform rituals around crystal replicas, believing they enhance intuition and open inner hearing. And although science hasn't confirmed such phenomena, there's a sense that the artifacts truly convey something more than just form. The transparent eye sockets reflect the light of torches, and the skulls seem to be watching, waiting, assessing. The crystal skulls of Central America are more than just artifacts. They are a mirror in which humanity sees its own ignorance. We can measure the speed of light and peer into an atom, but we cannot comprehend how ancient masters transformed cold stone into a living face. Perhaps they truly knew what we are only beginning to discover. When the setting sun penetrates the crystal and ignites it from within, the skull seems to smile. And in that moment, it seems as if someone is looking at us through the depths of time, not with a threat, but with a reminder that knowledge, once lost, can be reborn if we learn to see not with our eyes, but with our memories. The Maltese temples of Hagar Kim and Menadra. In the south of Malta, where the sea seems carved from blue glass, temples stand on rocky slopes that archaeologists estimate are over 5,000 years old. They are older than the Egyptian pyramids, older than Stonehenge, and even older than the first cities of Mesopotamia. Hagar Kim and Menadra are two stone complexes built on the edge of a cliff, as if someone wanted them to be seen not by humans, but by the heavens themselves. These temples are unlike any other known sanctuary in the world. Their walls curve as if alive, and the stone passages seem to be part of an organism in which time still breathes. Hagar Kim, which means standing stones in Maltese, is composed of enormous limestone blocks, each weighing several tons. Some are over 3 meters tall, yet they were carved and installed with perfect precision. The main entrance faces east, where, on the summer solstice, the sun rises directly over the stone gates, illuminating the interior halls. This moment creates the impression that the temple comes alive. Light filters through the holes in the slabs, creating patterns resembling spirals and stars on the walls. Nearby, just down the slope, lies Menadra, a temple whose architecture is even more enigmatic. Its chambers form a spiral structure, symbolizing the movements of the sun and moon. The stone altars are decorated with carved symbols, circles, dots, and waves. Scholars still debate what they represent: solar cycles, the feminine principle, or some kind of number system lost along with its creators. Holes remain in the walls, through which the sun's rays fall directly on the central slabs on the equinoxes and solstices, as if indicating the beginning of a new season. This is no coincidence, but a precise astronomical calculation made thousands of years before the invention of the compass. How Stone Age people managed to construct such structures remains a question no one has answered. No tools capable of shaping limestone with such precision have been found on the island. No traces of metal devices capable of moving multi-ton blocks have been found. Maltese archaeologists speculate that the builders used a system of levers and stone balls, but there is no evidence. Furthermore, the blocks are stacked in such a way that it's impossible to fit even a knife blade between them, and the walls have stood unsupported for thousands of years, having survived earthquakes and storms. The acoustics of temples are of particular interest to researchers. Any sound inside is amplified and acquires a low resonance that causes the chest to vibrate. This effect is so strong that some researchers believe it is intentional. Perhaps ancient priests used voices and drums to induce a trance or communicate with the gods through sound. Experiments have shown that the frequency at which temple walls resonate matches the range of the human voice. This means that the architecture was designed not only for sight, but also for hearing. There's a theory that Hagar Kim and Menadra weren't just temples, but part of a complex dedicated to the worship of Mother Earth. Numerous figurines of rounded female figures, which archaeologists call fertility goddesses, were found inside. However, these figurines don't resemble ordinary women. Their faces are featureless, their eyes are oversized, and their bodies appear stylized as symbols rather than humanoids. Some researchers believe they depict not a woman, but a force of some kind, one that connects heaven, earth, and water. Hidden niches containing burnt animal bones were discovered beneath the floor of Najdra. Judging by the evidence, sacrificial rituals were performed here. But strangely, among the animal bones were fragments of stone figurines and parts of vessels made of a rare clay not found on the island. This suggests that the builders had connections with other regions, possibly the mainland or even Egypt. Yet, in style and technology, these temples remain unique. They resemble neither Egyptian, Mesopotamian, nor Aegean structures. Modern archaeologists believe that the culture of Malta's temple builders disappeared suddenly. Traces of their life end around 3000 BC. There are no signs of war, famine, or catastrophe. They simply departed, leaving the temples intact. Perhaps the climate changed, or perhaps they migrated. But local legends tell a different story. Elders said that one day a hum of light came from the sea, and those living near the temples heard a sound that made the stones sing. After that, the builders disappeared. A few years later, other peoples appeared on the island, unaware of who had erected these walls. Today, at sunset, the light falls on the stones as if they were breathing. Shadows shift, the spiral lines come to life, and at that moment, it becomes clear that the temples still fulfill their purpose. They continue to communicate with the sky. Tourists who enter often report feeling a strange pressure in their chests, as if the air were becoming denser. Some hear a hum, like a distant choir. Scientists attribute this to acoustics, but the impression remains. The temple seems to respond to human presence. There's another mystery. If you connect the lines between the temples of Menajdra, Hagar Kim, and the neighboring Gantija on the island of Gozo on a map, you'll get a triangle whose sides align with the directions of the planet's magnetic field. Moreover, the vertices of the triangle point to the sites of other ancient megalithic structures, Stonehenge and the pyramids of Egypt. Whether this is a coincidence or whether the builders were aware of the existence of global geometry remains unclear. Maltese temples are more than just stones. They are the breath of time that has not vanished. As soon as you enter and touch the wall, it seems as if a faint vibration vibrates beneath your fingers. Perhaps it's the sound of the sea beneath the earth, or perhaps the memory of those who spoke to the world, not with words, but with form. These temples don't ask, don't explain, don't teach. They simply stand, gazing toward the horizon, where the sun repeats the ancient rite of birth every morning. And when the first rays touch the stone, the silence is filled with light, as if the sky itself momentarily recognizes the place where prayer once began. Antikythera mechanism. In western Greece, between the islands of Kythera and Crete, a storm at the beginning of the 20th century washed up the remains of an ancient ship. It had lain on the seabed for over 2,000 years, hidden by seaweed and coral, until sponge divers accidentally discovered it in 1900. They expected to find amphorae and jewelry, but instead saw something else. A tangle of bronze wheels, covered in green corrosion. At the time, no one understood what it was. Only decades later did it become clear. This was not just an ancient mechanism, but perhaps the most mysterious device ever created by man. The artifact was later named after its location, the Antikythera mechanism. It's approximately 2,000 years old and the size of a shoebox. But the complexity of its design astounds even modern engineers. Inside the mechanism were over 30 bronze gears, each with teeth honed to mathematical precision. When scientists assembled the fragments and x-rayed them, they realized they weren't looking at a decoration or part of a device. It was a calculating machine. The ancient Greeks had created the equivalent of a mechanical computer, capable of predicting planetary movements, eclipses, lunar phases, and even the dates of the Olympic Games. But how is this possible? History claims that at that time, around the 2nd century BCE, humanity lacked the technology to create such mechanisms. Metallurgy was primitive, precision tools were non-existent, and gear trains were considered impossible to machine by hand. And yet, the Antikythera mechanism exists. Its components fit together perfectly, as if they were made using machines that couldn't possibly exist. Researchers discovered ancient Greek inscriptions on the casing, which turned out to be operating instructions. A translation revealed that the device was indeed used to calculate the movements of celestial bodies. One scale marked the dates of solar and lunar eclipses, while another marked the cycles of the planets. The scientists compared the calculation results with modern data and confirmed that the device was accurate. The error in calculations for years to come was no more than a few minutes. Who could have created such a machine? There are many theories. Some attribute its authorship to Archimedes, others to an unknown school of astronomers from the island of Rhodes. Perhaps it was the collaborative work of scientists inspired by the idea of combining mathematics with the movement of the heavens. But what's surprising is that after this discovery, such technologies disappeared for almost 2,000 years. Europe only rediscovered gear transmissions during the Renaissance. This means the knowledge embodied in the mechanism was lost and forgotten. The most astonishing thing about the Antikythera mechanism is not its precision, but its logic. It has no superfluous parts, each gear has its purpose, and the entire system obeys perfect harmony. When reenactors assembled a replica of the device, they discovered that it doesn't simply count, it displays the universe in miniature. By turning a single handle, a person sets in motion an entire model of the universe. Inside are the sun, moon, and planets, rotating in their own cycles, connected by a system of gears that mimic celestial laws. This isn't just a device, it's philosophy, encapsulated in metal. Some researchers believe the device served rituals rather than science. In ancient times, priests at astronomical temples used complex calculations to predict eclipses, believing them to be signs from the gods. Perhaps the mechanism was part of a sacred instrument that manifested the will of the heavens. One of the plates is engraved with the words Aphrodite's phase and Hermes' cycle. This hints that its creators linked planetary movements with mythology, turning science into a mystery. In the 20th century, dozens of specialists studied the device. X-ray analysis revealed that much more was preserved inside than previously thought. Some components were hidden under layers of oxide, and several more dials were discovered within them. One of them tracked Saturn's 29-year cycle, another the 18-year eclipse cycle known as Saros. Only people who had been observing the sky for centuries could have calculated such precision. Skeptics believe the mechanism was a unique piece, unparalleled. However, in recent years, fragments have been discovered in Greece that structurally resemble parts of similar devices. This suggests that there was an entire school of engineers mastering these technologies, which subsequently disappeared. Perhaps their knowledge was lost in the destruction of Alexandria, where libraries and laboratories burned.
Some alternative researchers propose a more ambitious theory. The Antikythera mechanism is just one artifact created by a civilization that knew more than us. They believe similar devices could have been used not only to observe the sky, but also to synchronize with Earth's cycles, predict cataclysms, and even measure time distinct from human time. Proponents of this theory point out that the rotation angles of the gears correspond to the orbital relationships of the planets, but with an accuracy that was only calculated in the 19th century.
Interestingly, the ancient Greeks called mechanical devices pneumatics, living machines. They believed that mechanics could emulate the soul of the world. Perhaps the mechanism's creators truly saw it not as a tool, but as a living reflection of the cosmos. When archaeologists turned the restored handle, the device emitted a soft, metallic ringing sound, like the breath of harmony itself. Today, the mechanism is housed in the Archaeological Museum of Athens. It lies in a glass display case, illuminated by a cold light, and appears almost fragile. But take a closer look, and you realize this isn't just an ancient device, but evidence that human intelligence once reached heights we can only dream of. Looking at the tiny gears, you feel not awe, but a quiet awe. For if such knowledge existed, where did it disappear to? Who took away humanity's ability to create such things? And why did history choose to forget it? Modern engineers have attempted to reproduce the mechanism completely. Some models actually function, displaying the movements of the moon and sun with hourly accuracy. But no craftsman has been able to handcraft the parts as the ancients did. Even with modern machines, there remains a microscopic error that the original lacks. This means that the creators possess tools unknown to us. There's another strange fact. Metal analysis revealed that the bronze from which the components are made contains an unusual proportion of tin and copper, creating an alloy highly resistant to corrosion. Over 2,000 years, the mechanism has not crumbled, but has merely become coated with a thin film of oxide. This alloying technology is not found in any other ancient artifact. This means that a secret was used to create it, one no longer in use. Sometimes, when the light falls on the gear teeth, it seems as if they're still moving. This effect is created by the shadows, but it's hard to escape. The device seems alive. Many museum visitors report feeling a strange energy near the display case, as if the air is thickening. Perhaps it's a suggestion, but the impression remains. Before you is not just metal, but something greater than the sum of its parts. The Antikythera mechanism is a reminder that the human mind once grasped the harmony of the world and then lost it again. Its creators may not have considered themselves inventors. They were simply repeating what they saw in the stars. Each gear here is like the movement of a planet, each revolution like the breath of heaven. And if you stand before this artifact long enough, it begins to seem as if it hears, that it still works, not physically, but internally, as a symbol of how we once knew how to combine mathematics, faith, and art into a single breath of the universe. And perhaps one day when humanity regains its lost memory, we will understand that the Antikythera mechanism was no miracle. It was simply a reminder of a time when man did not yet separate science from the gods, but knew that stars, metal, and thought are one and the same substance. Yonaguni, off the southwestern coast of Japan, where the water becomes as thick as glass and the seabed drops away into the deep blue abyss, lies what sailors call the Stone City. In 1986, diver Kihachiro Aratake, while exploring the underwater currents off Yonaguni Island, stumbled upon a structure that couldn't be natural. Beneath the water, at a depth of about 25 meters, he saw gigantic steps, as smooth as if carved with a ruler. They descended into the darkness, forming terraces, walls, and corridors. Thus began one of the most astonishing archaeological mysteries of our time. When the first photographs appeared in the Japanese press, the world was divided. Some claimed they were the remains of an ancient city swallowed by the sea. Others insisted they were merely natural formations created by wind and water. But neither theory could explain everything. Yonaguni resembles neither a rock nor ruins. It is something in between, as if nature and man had worked together to create a form that no one could replicate. The main massif, known as the Yonaguni Monument, is approximately 150 meters long and over 20 meters high. Its stepped platforms are arranged with perfect symmetry, the angles are even, and the surfaces are smooth, as if carved by a tool. In some areas, cut marks are visible, straight lines that cannot be explained by erosion. On one level, there is a passage resembling a tunnel leading beneath the base, and nearby is what appears to be a gate, decorated with rectangular projections. Scientists diving there with underwater robots have recorded numerous horizontal and vertical lines consistent with architectural logic. Stairs, columns, platforms, even something resembling a podium. Geologist Masaki Kimura, who has devoted decades to studying Yonaguni, claims that the complex was built by humans and sank approximately 10,000 years ago, during a period when sea levels were significantly lower. If true, the monument predates the Egyptian pyramids and any known city on Earth. Skeptics counter that the region's basalt rocks are indeed capable of cracking into smooth layers. However, too many right angles and horizontal lines aligned at precise angles have been found on Yonaguni's surface for this to be a coincidence. Furthermore, stone blocks arranged to form walls and fragments resembling carved steps have been discovered near the monument. All of this creates the impression of an ancient city buried underwater. There are theories that Yonaguni is part of the legendary continent of Mu, mentioned in Japanese and Indonesian legends as a land that sank beneath the ocean. According to myths, this continent was inhabited by people possessing knowledge that no one has since been able to replicate. When the waters rose, they departed, leaving behind cities that now rest on the seabed. Archaeologists, of course, reject these legends, but the coincidences give rise to speculation. Interestingly, the Yonaguni structure is oriented precisely north. The main staircase points to the point where the sun sets on the summer solstice. Such a coincidence is unlikely for a natural formation. Moreover, some slabs on the upper level form a circle with a diameter of approximately 10 meters, which may be analogous to a ritual site. When divers explored the complex at night, under artificial lighting, the walls appeared to be covered in patterns. Upon closer inspection, it turned out this was no illusion. Some of the slabs actually contained engravings, lines resembling ancient symbols or maps. Their origin was never explained, and the images themselves were overgrown with coral, as if the sea were trying to conceal them again. Over the years, dozens of theories have emerged surrounding Yonaguni. Some believe it is the remains of an ancient city destroyed by an earthquake and sunk by rising sea levels. Others believe it was a place of worship, a temple, or a sanctuary where sea gods were worshipped. There's also a bolder theory. Yonaguni was an observatory used by the ancients to observe the stars and tides. Supporters of this theory note that some of the monument's lines align with the directions of the constellation Orion and the belt of the star Sirius. The underwater silence reinforces the feeling that this place is not just ancient, but alive. The water glides gently along the walls, reflecting the sun's rays, and the stones seem to move. Divers report a humming sound below, a low, almost inaudible sound, like a heartbeat. Some report that compasses and echo sounders malfunction near the monument. Perhaps this is simply the effect of underwater currents, but the feeling remains unsettling, as if someone underwater is still keeping secrets here. The Japanese government has long avoided making official statements about Yonaguni. Research is conducted by private groups, and most of the data is published by enthusiasts. Some finds, such as fragments of pottery and worked stones, are hotly debated. Their origin confirms human intervention, but official science is cautious. No one wants to admit that people 10,000 years ago could build open-air cities with engineering skills equal to those of today. There is evidence of other structures underwater, a few kilometers from Yonaguni. Straight walls, pillars, and traces of roads disappearing beneath the sand. While they are currently inaccessible for study, satellite images do reveal strange shapes. All of this suggests that the monument was only part of a larger complex, possibly a metropolis destroyed by the disaster. When you look at photographs of Yonaguni, it's hard to shake the feeling that they're a message. The stones are arranged as if someone was trying to tell a story, but the words were washed away by the water. Every corner, every step, reminds you of an intention, a design that's now slipping away. Perhaps this was a city, perhaps a temple, or perhaps simply the place where man and the sea first met. Today, Yonaguni remains one of the planet's most impressive underwater mysteries. On clear days, the water is so clear that the upper terraces can be seen from the surface. They lie motionless, like a book sealed by time. And if the sea could speak, it might tell us who built these walls and why. But the sea remains silent, and only the current whispers through the crevices of the stone, repeating the same sound, like a breath that has lasted for thousands of years. Yonaguni is a reminder that human history is not confined to dry land. Beneath the water, in the darkness where silence is thicker than air, lie pages we have yet to read. And perhaps one day when someone descends again into this blue abyss, a spotlight will touch a wall engraved with words understood by all the peoples of the world. But until then, the underwater city will wait. It doesn't call, doesn't threaten, doesn't demand. It simply holds, as if it knows that sooner or later, man will again yearn to know where he came from. And perhaps the answer has long since lain where the sea touches the stars and the darkness becomes a mirror of memory. Nazca Lines. High on the Nazca Plateau, in the middle of the Peruvian desert, lie lines, thin, smooth, stretching to the horizon, as if drawn by an invisible hand. From a distance, they look like mere footprints in the sand, but ascend higher, and figures unfold before your eyes. Birds, snakes, spiders, hummingbirds, a man with a raised hand, geometric shapes, spirals, arrows, and roads leading to nowhere. They cover an area of over 500 square kilometers and are visible only from the air. Who created them and why, no one knows to this day. These drawings appeared on the map of humanity in the 20th century, when pilots flying over the desert noticed strange patterns on the ground. Almost 100 years have passed since then, but the mystery remains. Some see them as an astronomical calendar, others as ritual sites, and still others as messages to the gods. Or perhaps all of these. After all, every line, every curve, is executed with such precision that it is impossible to see them in their entirety while standing on the ground. To draw such a thing, one would have to understand not only geometry, but also the very concept of the horizon. The Nazca Lines are one of the driest places on Earth. There's almost no rain here, and so the lines have survived for thousands of years. A dry wind blows away dust, revealing a layer of light-colored soil where shadows create the appearance of relief. Walking along them, it feels like following in the footsteps of giants. Some lines stretch for tens of kilometers without deviating even a degree. All around is emptiness, silence, only the wind and the rustling of sand. And all of this seems designed for someone to look down on. Scientists have tried to understand the meaning of the figures. German archaeologist Maria Reiche dedicated her life to this. She measured each line, drew maps, and compared the designs with the positions of the stars. Her theory was that Nazca is a gigantic observatory, where each figure indicates the movement of the sun, moon, and stars. On the day of the solstice, light falls precisely along certain lines, and the shadows follow the outlines of the figures. But not everyone agrees. Many lines do not align with any known celestial cycle, as if following a different logic. It has been suggested that the drawings are related to water. In ancient times, desert dwellers relied on underground springs, and the lines may have marked the paths to them. Some figures, such as a spider and a monkey, appear on Nazca pottery and are associated with rain and fertility. This theory is supported by the fact that many of the drawings contain wells leading to underground channels. These may have been sacred signs addressed to the spirits of water. But the question remains, why such a scale? Why the patterns visible only from the sky? From time to time, theories about an extraterrestrial origin surface. Proponents of alternative theories claim that the lines were created as landing strips or signals for beings observing the Earth from above. In fact, in some areas, there are indeed long parallel stripes that look like runways, but no traces of machinery, no signs of burning, no debris have been found. All that remains are perfect lines, as if drawn by thought. When archaeologists began dating the lines, they discovered that they were approximately 2,500 years old. This was the time when the Nazca civilization was just beginning to develop. People lived in clay houses, used simple tools, and had no knowledge of the wheel or metal. How could they have created something that we can only fully see from a height of several hundred meters? Perhaps they used hot air balloons. Theories of fabric bags filled with hot air have indeed been suggested, but there is no evidence. The most mysterious thing is the feeling you get when looking at the lines. From space, they seem tiny, but from an airplane, you can see how they transform the desert into a gigantic message. It carries no letters, no beginning or end. Each figure seems to echo the breath of the earth. A hummingbird with wings hundreds of meters long reaches for the sky. A monkey curls its tail into a spiral. A man with window-like eyes looks straight up. Some researchers claim the lines are connected by complex geometry. Connecting the dots where the shapes intersect creates a pattern reminiscent of ancient harmonic patterns, similar to musical intervals or mathematical series. This suggests the drawings weren't created randomly, but as part of a system where each line has meaning, like a note in a melody. There's also a mystical version. Locals call the plateau the land where they speak with the gods. According to legend, these lines were paths along which priests walked, performing rites addressed to the sky. During droughts, they would emerge at night and move along the lines, lighting torches. From above, they looked like fiery drawings, living signs asking for rain. Perhaps this was precisely the purpose of the lines, to be seen by the gods, not humans. When the sun sets over the Nazca Desert, the air becomes still and shadows stretch along the lines. Everything around freezes, as if time itself has ceased to flow. At such moments, the drawings seem to breathe. People who have been there say they feel a strange calm, as if an invisible force fills the space. Perhaps because these lines are not simply marks on the ground, but a reflection of the human desire to be heard. The Nazca lines are a message written not in words but in form. It has survived the winds, sandstorms, and centuries. No one knows to whom it was addressed, but it still lies there, in the sun, unerased by time. Perhaps it is a reminder that ancient people saw in the sky not only stars, but also a mirror reflecting their thoughts. And when a plane rises above the plateau and a huge spider appears under the wing, it seems as if it is not simply a drawing, as if it is moving, alive, continuing its ancient journey across the land, where man once learned to speak to the sky, but still hasn't understood what he said. Petra, Jordan, a city carved directly into the rock. In the middle of the Wadi Musa Desert, where red sand turns to dust and the wind seems to breathe fire, lies a city that cannot be built. It can only be carved. Petra lies in the heart of stone, as if the earth itself had decided to become architecture. The narrow Siku Canyon leads there, like a corridor between eras. Its walls rise tens of meters, compressing the sky to a thin strip, and suddenly, after a kilometer of shadow, the view opens up, a facade glowing in the dawn light, as if flames frozen in stone. This is Al-Khazna, the treasury temple, which seems unreal even at hand. Petra was the capital of the Nabateans, a mysterious nomad people who knew how to tame the desert. They left no chronicles or written history, only stone facades, palaces, temples, and tombs carved directly into the mountain. Their city seemed to grow out of the rock itself, but every line, every column is crafted with such symmetry that it resembles the work of masters who mastered geometry and light better than modern engineers. Morning rays illuminate the facades at a precise angle, creating a sense of movement. Stone is not dead, it breathes. Archaeologists estimate that Petra was founded over 2,000 years ago, but the very style of construction hints at knowledge derived from more ancient cultures. The building facades combine Hellenistic columns, Babylonian motifs, and Eastern symbols. Egyptian and Greek influences are evident, but the harmony of form is so perfect that it leaves no doubt that Petra's architects weren't copying, but creating their own language. The city's greatest secret is water. Petra is located in one of the driest valleys of the Arabian Desert, where rain falls only once a year. But the Nabateans managed to construct a system of canals and reservoirs that enabled the city to thrive. Drains were carved into the rocks, channeling rainwater into cisterns, and every crack in the stone became a spring. The system was so precise that Petra could supply water to tens of thousands of residents and even grow gardens. This engineering marvel is no less astonishing than the temples. The main temple, Al-Khazna, is carved from a single pink cliff. It stands almost 40 meters high. On the facade are columns, statues, and capitals, all crafted from stone, without a single block. Legend has it that the treasures of the pharaoh who hid from Moses were kept here. But inside, there is no gold, only emptiness and echoes. This is the symbol of Petra, beauty without mystery, or, conversely, mystery hidden within beauty. Beyond the temple, a real city opens up. Streets carved into stone, palace facades, steps leading to the sky. There's an amphitheater capable of holding several thousand people, carved directly into the mountain. Chisel marks are visible on the walls, but the structure is perfectly precise. Archaeologists are certain this would have been impossible without metal tools, but the Nabateans left only stone traces. How they achieved such precision, no one knows. The tombs are particularly impressive. Their facades are decorated with ornaments, and the entrances are so narrow that the sun penetrates them for only a few minutes a day. Inside are empty chambers, smooth and even, like polished glass. Some of them emit a hum when a person speaks within. This acoustic effect creates the impression that the stone is responding. Perhaps rituals were held here, where the voice was transformed into a prayer, returned by the rock itself. At night, Petra is transformed. The sand cools, the air becomes clear, and the stones appear blue in the moonlight. At this time, the city seems alive. Shadows move, as if invisible inhabitants are walking along ancient paths. Locals say that at these hours, the wind carries the sounds of flutes and drums, echoes of festivals that took place here thousands of years ago. No one knows if this is true, but everyone who has been to Petra at night speaks of a strange sense of presence. Petra's greatest mystery is why it disappeared. The city flourished for centuries, but suddenly it became deserted. Scholars blame earthquakes and shifting trade routes, but there's no evidence of war or destruction. It's as if everything stopped. The people left, but the stone remained. Sand covered the streets, and Petra became a ghost until it was rediscovered in the 19th century by the Swiss traveler Johann Burckhardt, posing as an Arab merchant. He walked through the Psyche, saw the facade, and realized he was looking at not just a city, but a mirage made real. Since then, Petra has become a symbol of mystery, architecture, and silence. Scientists continue to examine every meter of the rock, but questions only multiply. Why are there so many architectural elements that match Egyptian and Greek proportions? yet are aligned with the stars? Why are some facades perfectly aligned with the solstices? And who taught the Nabateans to transform stone into living space? Modern technology has revealed that Petra conceals additional halls and galleries underground. Radar images have revealed structures extending deep beneath the main temples. Some of them are connected by corridors not found on the map. Perhaps the city we see is only a small part, and the real Petra lies underground. Everything here is built around the light. In the morning, the sun's rays fall on the facades from the east. By midday, they are tinted golden. By evening, they turn blood red. The color of the stone changes 3 times a day, as if the city were breathing its own life. When sunset engulfs the walls, Petra seems to vanish. Only morning brings it back. This makes it resemble a living being, capable of being born and dying every day. Local Bedouins say the city will not be abandoned. They believe the hearts of the ancient builders still beat underground, and the walls retain their breath. They call Petra not a city, but a heart of stone, because here, everything is not ruins, but memory. Petra is more than just an architectural marvel. It is a song of time frozen in stone. It is devoid of superfluity, only form, light, and silence. And perhaps that is precisely why it is more powerful than words. When you stand before its facade, you feel not pride, but humility. After all, if people were able to carve an entire city from a mountain, it means they once knew how to speak to eternity. And Petra is their answer. Not a letter, not a missive, but a breath frozen in rock, to remind the world, thousands of years from now, that everything born of stone and light does not die. It simply waits for man to learn to see again. Pyramids of Teotihuacan, Mexico. Unknown people without writing. 50 kilometers from modern Mexico City lies a place where the earth seems to hold the breath of the gods. Teotihuacan, the city where the gods are born, was what the Aztecs called it when they arrived 1,000 years after the city lay in ruins. No one knows who built it. No chronicles, no names, no legends of its creators have survived. Only the stones remain, pyramids, roads, and temples, crafted with such precision that even today they evoke awe. The city scientists are still debating how the builders achieved such symmetry without tools or writing. Each level of the pyramid is perfectly aligned, and beneath it, as recent research has revealed, lies an artificial cave, a tunnel extending deep into the earth. Its walls are covered with a layer of minerals that reflect light, and in the center, a circular chamber has been discovered, containing numerous ceramic figurines, golden balls, and traces of mercury. Some archaeologists suggest that this is a symbolic subterranean heaven, a reflection of the cosmos within the Earth's depths. Teotihuacan was designed with incomprehensible precision. All its streets are oriented toward the mountains, and the corners of the buildings align with the Orion star belt. Even the distance between the pyramids matches the proportions used in the ancient Egyptian pyramids of Giza. But oceans and millennia separate these civilizations. Coincidence or knowledge transmitted through unknown means? Who were these people? Not a single text, inscription, or name has been found. They left no written language, and it seems they had no need for one. Their language was architecture, their writing, symmetry. Everything in the city was subordinated to number. The Pyramid of the Moon stands at the northern end, and from its summit, a view of the Cerro Gordo volcano opens up, as if nature itself had become part of the ritual. It is believed that from its summit, priests observe the sky, counting the cycles of the sun and moon. During excavations, archaeologists found traces of paint on the walls. The entire city was once covered in vibrant frescoes. They depict strange creatures, masked people, birds, clouds, and symbols resembling streams of energy. One of the most famous scenes depicts a figure with green rays erupting from its chest. Perhaps this is the sun god, perhaps a symbol of the birth of life. But the style of the paintings is so unusual that it is unlike any other in the Americas. More than 100 human remains were found inside the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent, sacrificial offerings executed with frightening precision. Each body had its hands bound, and its skulls were facing the center. This suggests a complex belief system in which death was not the end, but part of a cycle. Perhaps these people believed that by giving their lives, they maintained the balance of the world. When the Spaniards first heard of Teotihuacan, they assumed it was built by giants. Indeed, the scale of this place defies human comprehension. It covers approximately 20 square kilometers, and everything within it is constructed according to a unified plan. Even modern cities rarely achieve such harmony. Scientists have determined that the city was abandoned around the 7th century AD. It wasn't destroyed, the inhabitants simply left, leaving behind their homes, temples, and roads. The reason is unknown. Perhaps it was due to a drought, perhaps to religious changes. But when the Aztecs arrived, they found everything intact and declared it the birthplace of the gods. It was here, according to their belief, that the sun first rose over the world. Modern research using ground-penetrating radar has uncovered a network of underground tunnels beneath Teotihuacan. Some of them connect pyramids while others lead nowhere. Traces of mica, a rare, heat-resistant mineral, were found in one tunnel. Its origin is unknown, but it is found only in South America, thousands of kilometers away. This suggests that the builders had connections or resources unknown to science. There's a theory that the city was not just a religious center, but a place of learning. Perhaps priests and sages from various tribes flocked here to study the stars and the cycles of time. Teotihuacan could have been an ancient academy where knowledge was sacred. At night, when the Milky Way rises above the pyramids, it seems as if heaven and earth are united. The stone peaks reflect the stars, and everything around them freezes. Teotihuacan is not destroyed, it sleeps. Even after 2,000 years, this city radiates a strange power. Tourists report feeling a slight pressure in their chests when standing at the top of the Pyramid of the Sun, as if the air were thickening. Local shamans say this is the breath of the earth. Teotihuacan is more than just a city. It is the memory of a civilization that knew how to think in terms of the stars and build in time. They left no names because perhaps they believed that knowledge does not belong to man. It belongs to the universe itself. And when you stand among these stones under a sky where the stars shine, as they did thousands of years ago, you feel as if you are not among ruins, but in a living temple, where the planet itself breathes through the stone, reminding you that what is forgotten is not gone. It waits for man to raise his eyes to the sky again. Stonehenge. On Salisbury Plain, where the wind blows between the hills and the grass whispers beneath the clouds, stones stand arranged in a perfect circle. Stonehenge is a place where silence seems older than the earth itself. Enormous blocks of gray sandstone rise from the earth like frozen sentinels of time. Thousands of years old, yet they still stand, precisely in their order, as if awaiting a signal that should have sounded but never did. Every stone here is set with mathematical precision. The outer circle is about 30 meters in diameter, and some of the boulders weigh over 20 tons. But the mystery lies not in their size, but in their origin. The main stones, the sarcens, were quarried 30 kilometers from here, while the so-called blue stones came from Wales, over 200 kilometers away. How Stone Age people managed to transport them here remains an unanswered question. Wheels, roads, and machinery didn't exist back then. Stonehenge appears as a chaotic circle, but upon closer inspection, it becomes clear it's an astronomical mechanism. On the summer solstice, the sun rises directly over the heel stone, passing along the axis of the central corridor. On the winter solstice, it sets exactly opposite. This is no coincidence. This means the builders knew the cycles of the sun and moon, understood the geometry of the heavens, and could construct structures with precision down to the degree. Scientists believe the first stones were laid around 5,000 years ago, but traces beneath the foundations indicate that the site was in use long before that. It may have been a sacred center, where tribes from all over Britain came to greet the sun, celebrate the equinoxes, and perform rituals. Archaeologists have found traces of ancient settlements and human bones nearby. Some bodies were buried with unusual precision, their faces facing east, and stone tools and amber necklaces lie nearby. This suggests that Stonehenge was not just an observatory but also a sanctuary, a place where life and death merged. When serious research first began, it was discovered that the stones formed not one, but several concentric circles. Within the largest circle stands a horseshoe-shaped arch of vertical blocks, spanned by horizontal slabs. This engineering marvel was a marvel for its time. Each slab is perfectly aligned, and the joints are tongue and groove, like those found in wooden structures. This method of joining will allow the stones to stand for millennia, withstanding wind and rain. Some scholars believe Stonehenge served not only as a calendar, but also as a place of healing. In the Welsh mountains, where the blue stones were quarried, there is a legend that they possess healing powers. Perhaps people came here for healing, believing that the earth's energy flowed through the stones. Old bones found nearby show signs of healed wounds, as if those who visited truly recovered. But the biggest mystery is why it was built, and who built it. Stonehenge has no inscriptions, no images, no names. It's as if the builders wanted the stones to speak for themselves. Perhaps it was a place of communion with the sky, a place where they measured not only time, but eternity itself. There's also an alternative theory. Stonehenge was a giant resonator. Under certain wind conditions and moon positions, a hum, barely audible to the human ear, is generated between the stones. Modern acousticians have confirmed that the structure amplifies low frequencies, creating a vibrational effect. Perhaps the ancients used sound as part of a ritual to awaken the earth. Standing in the center of the circle, between the stones, the sense of time vanishes. The air is thick, footsteps echo hollowly in the earth, and the horizon seems closer. People who have been here at dawn say they've seen sunlight filter through the arch, and for a moment, the entire circle glows soft gold. In that moment, you feel that Stonehenge is not a monument. It's an instrument attuned to the breath of the universe. Today, the site is fenced off, but thousands of people come here every summer solstice. They greet the sunrise in silence, as they did thousands of years ago, and for a moment, their eyes reflect the same sun that the builders saw. Stonehenge needs no explanation. It stands because it must stand. It is a message from a time when man did not yet separate heaven and earth, but simply lived within their breath. And as long as the stones continue to form a circle, it seems as if the ancient mechanism still works, measuring not minutes, but eternity. Göbekli Tepe, on a hilltop in southeastern Turkey, where the earth is scorched by the sun and the wind carries the scent of stone, archaeologists found something they never expected. Hidden beneath layers of soil was a temple older than all known civilizations. Göbekli Tepe existed long before the pyramids, long before writing and cities. Its age, over 12,000 years old, has revolutionized our understanding of the beginnings of human history. When Professor Klaus Schmidt first saw these hills, he thought they were ordinary burial mounds. But after excavating the top layer, archaeologists discovered circles of gigantic stone slabs. They stood vertically, forming rings, and at the center of each circle were two taller monoliths, weighing 20 tons each. Their surfaces were covered in reliefs: lions, snakes, foxes, birds, and boars. The animals seemed to come alive in the sunlight, and it seemed as if before you were not just carvings, but the language spoken by the ancient land. The main mystery is that Göbekli Tepe was built by hunters and gatherers, people who knew nothing of agriculture or metalworking. They had no cities, but they erected a temple that required incredible coordination and labor. Stones weighing tens of tons had to be quarried, cut, transported, and installed. This means these people already had a society with organization, architecture, and religion, all this long before humanity officially entered the age of civilization. Scientists speculate that Göbekli Tepe was a sanctuary, a place where rituals uniting tribes took place. No houses, hearths, or traces of permanent habitation have been found here. This means that people came here from far and wide to participate in the rituals. Perhaps it was a place of worship for ancestors or the forces of nature. The monoliths themselves resemble human figures. Some are engraved with arms, belts, and even symbolic clothing. The two central stones in each circle seem to depict two beings, perhaps gods, perhaps spirits, facing each other. Everything suggests that the people who built this place already thought in symbols, understood death, power, and a connection to the invisible. Another mystery is why the temple was filled in. The layer of soil covering Göbekli Tepe is not natural. It was deliberately filled in carefully, without any trace of destruction. Perhaps the builders wanted to conceal the sanctuary, to preserve it from time. But why? Perhaps they knew an era was ending, and left this place to future generations, like a letter. Research has shown that the temple is aligned with the stars. At the time of its construction, the constellation Orion and the star Deneb were located directly above the central axis. This means that the builders observed the sky and understood the cycles of the stars. For a society living without cities or writing, this is incredible. Some stones depict scenes that scientists call a calendar of catastrophes. They depict a comet falling from the sky and animals fleeing. Perhaps this commemorates a global event, the fall of a meteorite that changed the Earth's climate and ushered in a new era? If so, Göbekli Tepe may be not only a temple, but also a monument to the catastrophe experienced by humanity. Archaeologists have found dozens of rings underground, but only a small fraction have been excavated. Each new circle reveals more secrets. One of the monoliths is carved with the figure of a headless man surrounded by predators. This could be a symbol of sacrifice, or it could also be a philosophical image, the soul's transition to another world. The Göbekli Tepe changed our understanding of human development. Before its discovery, it was believed that cities came first, then religion. But here, it's the other way around. It was faith that united people, driving them to build the first structure on Earth. Not for protection, not for survival, but for meaning. Today, the temple is not fully exposed. Excavations are proceeding slowly because each layer is like a page of a book written in stone. Scientists carefully remove the soil, revealing symbols created by hands that have long since turned to dust. But the more they uncover, the more questions arise. Who taught these people to create such forms? Where did they acquire their knowledge of astronomy and engineering? And why did they decide to bury their creation? In the evening, when the sun sets behind the hills, the stones turn golden. The shadows from the reliefs fall on the ground, transforming into moving figures. The temple seems to come alive, as if those who built it are still here. Göbekli Tepe has not been destroyed by time. It sleeps, shrouded in the dust of centuries. Locals call it the navel of the world. And perhaps they're right. After all, if history truly begins here, then Göbekli Tepe is the birthplace of human thought, where man first realized that heaven and earth are one. And when you look at these stone figures, it seems they still gaze at the stars, just as they did thousands of years ago, waiting for humanity to remember why it learned to build. Not houses, but meanings. Olmec heads. On the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, in a land of tropical rain and sticky clay, stands something that defies explanation. Enormous stone heads, each as tall as a man, some over 2.5 meters tall, weigh tens of tons. Their faces are calm, their lips and noses wide, their gaze directed forward, as if they still guard the land where their creators once lived. These stones look down through the centuries, and no one knows who exactly they depict. When the first heads were discovered in the early 20th century, scientists were incredulous. After all, they were portraits, realistic, with individual features, as if carved from life. But the civilization that created them left no written language. It was called the Olmec civilization, and archaeologists believe it is from this civilization that all Mesoamerican culture began. The Olmecs lived here more than 3,000 years ago, but the origins of their art remain a mystery. A total of 17 heads were found. Each is unique. One has raised cheekbones, another a heavy chin, a third a slightly tossed gaze. These aren't masks, but portraits. And most astonishingly, they are all made of basalt, a stone quarried in the mountains hundreds of kilometers from the coast. Each block weighed tens of tons, and transporting it required knowledge and effort beyond the capabilities of an ancient society without wheels or draft animals. Scientists speculate that the heads were carved from boulders carried by rivers after volcanic eruptions. But even if the stones were found in valleys, how they were lifted, processed, and transported remains a mystery. Some researchers believe the Olmecs used dams and canals to float the boulders. However, the perfect symmetry of the faces and the smoothness of the surfaces suggest they had tools far more precise than stone. The strangest thing is the origin of the features. The faces don't resemble those of the locals. Thick lips, flat noses, large heads. All of this has sparked debate as to whether they reflect members of another race. Some see images of Africans, others of Polynesians, and still others claim they are simply symbols of strength, with no ethnic connotations. But the fact remains, each head seems to be the image of a specific person, a leader, a gambler, or perhaps a deity. Some heads reveal helmets with straps and patterns. This led archaeologists to speculate that the Olmecs depicted warriors or players of a ritual ball game, where victory and death were equally significant. In Mesoamerican culture, this game was considered sacred. The ball symbolized the sun, and the players were stars moving across the celestial field. If so, these heads are not monuments to individuals, but embodiments of a cosmic ritual. But the arrangement of the heads is also interesting. They are not arranged in a row or line. Each one is set separately at a distance from the others, often facing a specific direction. At San Lorenzo, the ancient Olmec capital, the heads form a circle, as if guarding an invisible center. Perhaps they were guardians, timekeepers, or clan symbols. Local legends say these stones aren't just images, but vessels inhabited by spirits. They say the heads breathe and whisper at night. People avoid approaching them after sunset, especially when it's raining. It's believed that's when the spirits awaken. Of course, this is a myth, but standing next to these giants, it's hard to shake the feeling that they are truly watching. Some archaeologists believe the Olmecs were heirs to an older culture that vanished long before them. Perhaps these heads are not their creation, but a legacy. Some of them show signs of reworking, as if the artisans were attempting to recreate existing forms. This deepens the mystery. Who was the first sculptor? If even the Olmecs considered them sacred, when sunlight falls on the basalt faces, shadows play across their cheeks and eyes, creating the illusion of movement. It seems as if the stone eyes are following your every step. In the heat, the stones warm up and begin to radiate heat, like living bodies. And at that moment, it becomes clear. These are not just monuments. They are embodied memories that have outlived those who created them. Today, the heads are displayed in museums and open-air spaces, surrounded by fences. But even there, they retain the same power. One wants to whisper before them. Their presence is both oppressive and captivating. They appear not as artifacts, but as witnesses. Olmec heads are more than just ancient art. They are a sign that human history is longer than we usually think. People who didn't have a written language managed to express in stone a face that still reveals life. And perhaps these faces look at us not from the past, but from a time when memory isn't yet divided into centuries. Their gaze conveys the serenity of those who have already understood that immortality begins the moment a person first carves themselves in stone. Doggerland. Hidden beneath the cold waters of the North Sea, between the coasts of England and the Netherlands, lies a land whose existence few know about. It's called Doggerland, a lost Europe, an ancient continent that once connected the British Isles to the mainland. Today it's the seabed, but 10,000 years ago, it was home to plains, rivers, and forests where mammoths and humans roamed. This land vanished not from time, but from water, suddenly and irrevocably. Doggerland was discovered by chance. Fishermen hauling in their nets began finding strange bones, ancient animal skulls, deer antlers, stone tools. All of these were rising from the seabed at a depth of 30 meters. At first, it was thought the objects had been washed out of the shore, but the finds kept coming. Then geologists began exploring, and beneath layers of silt, they discovered a map of the sunken world. It turns out that just 8,000 years ago, sea levels were much lower. A vast plain connected Britain to the continent. Rivers flowed here, there were swamps and lakes, and oak and birch trees grew. Archaeologists determined from tool marks that people lived here. They hunted, built shelters from bones, made tools, and possibly established the first settlements. This land was home to thousands of generations until one day the sea arrived. The gradual melting of the glaciers raised the water level, and the lowlands began to flood. People retreated, but one day changed everything. About 7,000 years ago, a powerful underwater earthquake off the coast of Norway generated a gigantic wave, the so-called Storegga tsunami. It crashed onto the plain, destroying all life. Within hours, water covered the lands that now lie at the bottom of the sea. The people living there vanished without a trace. Today, researchers call Doggerland the European Atlantis. But unlike myth, this Atlantis is real. Modern sonar and laser scanning have revealed the outlines of rivers, hills, and coastlines. Ancient riverbeds, roadbeds, and even traces of campsites are preserved underwater. In some places, the soil contains traces of ash and charcoal, the remains of fires buried beneath the silt. Scientists have also found the remains of animals that became extinct thousands of years ago. These include mammoths, bison, elk, and bears. All of this points to a rich ecosystem in which humans lived and developed. It is possible that the first forms of communication and trade between European tribes originated here. But the mystery of Doggerland isn't just its disappearance. In some places, the seafloor shows traces of symmetrical structures, ridges that resemble lines of buildings. While there's no evidence yet that these are man-made, geologists acknowledge that the shape is too smooth to be natural. This has led to speculation that, in the years leading up to the catastrophe, Doggerland's inhabitants built fortifications in an attempt to stem the encroaching sea. Diving in, Doggerland is impossible. The currents are too strong, visibility is near zero. But using underwater scanners, researchers are creating 3D models of the sunken continent. They reveal valleys and elevations, like a map of a country that vanished yesterday. Looking at these images, it seems as if the sea simply hid the land, but didn't destroy it. For archaeologists, Doggerland has become the key to understanding human memory. After all, this catastrophe may have been imprinted in the myths of all ancient peoples. The legends of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East contain stories of a great flood, of vanished lands, of refugees who brought knowledge to other parts of the world. Perhaps the inhabitants of Doggerland were the first lost civilization, the memory of which survived into Sumerian and biblical legends. Interestingly, modern DNA studies of the British population show that traces of the ancient inhabitants of Doggerland still exist in the genes of modern humans. This means that those who escaped the water did not disappear, but simply moved further inland, leaving behind the sea, which became their grave. Locals, Doggerland is not a myth, but a warning. It reminds us that climate and the elements are stronger than civilizations. Where waves now roar and fishing boats sail, fires once burned and human voices rang out. And perhaps, if one day the sea recedes again, a city frozen in time will emerge beneath the waves, where peat walls still stand. Stone knives lie, and beneath the sand, bare footprints left by those who did not yet know, their world would vanish before dawn. Codex Gigas. In the quiet of an ancient monastery in the Czech Republic, a book resembling a portal more than a manuscript is preserved. It's called the Codex Gigas, the giant book, but popularly known as the Devil's Bible. It weighs over 50 kilograms, its pages are made from the skin of over 100 calves, and its ink, according to analysis, consists of rare minerals and animal blood. Most importantly, it was written by a single hand, without errors, without pauses, and with calligraphic precision, as if it were not created by a human. The origins of the Codex date back to the Middle Ages. According to the chronicles of the monastery in Podlozhice, a monk broke his vows and was sentenced to a terrible punishment: immurement alive. In despair, he promised to write a book that would glorify the monastery and atone for its sin if he were given one night. The abbot agreed, believing this impossible. But the next morning, the book was ready. When the brothers opened it, they saw that on one of the pages, next to prayers and chronicles, was a huge devil depicted, full length, with green eyes and clawed hands. According to legend, the monk didn't have time to finish the book and, in order to complete it by dawn, sold his soul. Thus was born the Codex Gigas, a book that, according to eyewitnesses, contains all the knowledge of the world. But even if we put aside the legends, the facts are no less strange. Researchers have confirmed that the handwriting on every page is absolutely identical. There is not the slightest fluctuation in the line, not a trace of fatigue. This means it was written by the same person, and for a long time, perhaps 20 or 30 years, without any noticeable change in style. This is physiologically impossible. The Codex contains over 600 pages. It contains biblical texts, medical treatises, descriptions of kingdoms, astronomical tables, and prayers. But between them are strange inserts, a list of demons, spells for banishing illness, an eclipse calendar, descriptions of celestial wonders, and even recipes for communicating with spirits. All of this is connected into a single system, as if the author truly attempted to compile a complete picture of the world, from the divine to the forbidden, in a single volume. One page is dedicated to a depiction of hell. 7 gates are depicted there, each adorned with symbols that would later appear in alchemical manuscripts. Some symbols defy translation. Researchers who examined the Codex under a microscope discovered that the lines of some symbols glow under ultraviolet light, as if the ink contained an unknown substance. The image of the devil itself takes up an entire spread. He sits against a black background, surrounded by emptiness. There are no words or decorations. Only opposite, on another page, is paradise depicted, symmetrically like a reflection. This is the only place in the book where there is no text. The monks said that these 2 pages contain the entire meaning of the book, the struggle between light and darkness within man. In the 15th century, the book disappeared several times. It was stolen, sold, and returned. It survived fires and wars, but didn't burn, even though libraries burned around it. There are reports that during the 30 Years' War, it was rescued by Swedish soldiers, but when the treasure ship sank, the Codex Gigas miraculously landed on shore, intact. This gave rise to rumors that the book neither sank nor burned because it was protected by the spirit itself, imprisoned within. Scientists studied the material of the pages. Each is made of tanned calfskin, but the grain is denser than usual, as if the leather had been specially treated. Traces of corrections are visible in the margins, but the ink has not faded, despite 8 centuries of use. When you open the Codex Gigas, the pages make a soft crackling sound, and the air fills with the scent of dust and old leather. They say you can hear a rustling sound in the silence, like someone turning the pages. It's certainly a draft. But the monks who served in Podlages claimed that breathing could be heard in the library at night, and in the morning, traces of ash remained on the cover. Today, the book is kept in the National Library of Sweden, under glass, in a separate room, with constant temperature and humidity. Access is restricted, but copies of the pages are available for study. Even on a computer screen, one can sense the strange appeal of these lines. The handwriting is too even, and the rhythm of the words seems as if written by a hand that knew it was creating something eternal. Scholars still haven't reached a consensus. Some say the author was manic, others that he was a genius. But they all agree on one thing: such a work cannot be replicated. The Codex Gigas is more than just a book. It's a mirror of the human soul, intertwined with light and darkness. It contains everything: faith, science, fear, the thirst for knowledge, and pride. Perhaps that's why it's called the Devil's Bible. Not because it was written by a demon, but because it reflects everything man fears to see within himself. And when one's gaze rests on the page with the green devil, it seems he's looking at one too. Not with menace, but with understanding, as if he knows that anyone who dares to read this book has already entered into a dialogue with that which lies beyond the light. Giza Plateau. On the west, the Great Pyramid of Cheops is the tallest of all. Its original height was almost 150 meters, and its sides deviate from a perfect square by no more than a few centimeters. Each stone block weighs several tons, and there are approximately 2 million of them in the structure. At its base, it covers an area of over 5 hectares. But the most astonishing thing is its precision. The base is oriented to the cardinal directions with such precision that even modern engineers are amazed. No one knows how the Egyptians managed to move and install stones with such precision without wheels, steel, or modern tools. Theories about ramps, levers, and rollers don't explain the most important thing: why the corners and joints of the blocks align perfectly, and the gaps between them are thinner than paper. Sand-blown winds, earthquakes, and heat have not destroyed the structure over thousands of years. It seems built not for time, but against it. Inside the pyramid, there is not chaos, but system. Galleries, shafts, and chambers are connected as if they were built by engineers with a grasp of geometry that humanity would only rediscover millennia later. The main gallery is aligned with the center of the planet, with an error of no more than a fraction of a degree. The shafts leading from the King's Chamber are aimed at the stars of the Orion and Sirius constellations. This means the pyramid is more than just a tomb. It is an astronomical instrument connecting Earth and heaven. Nearby stand the pyramids of Khafre and Menkaure, smaller in size but no less mysterious. Between them lies the Sphinx, carved from a single block of limestone. Its body is leonine, but its face is human. Some researchers believe it is an image of the sun, god Ra, others a portrait of Khafre. However, the face shows signs of erosion, similar to water, meaning the Sphinx is older than all the pyramids. It was perhaps created long before the pharaohs. For centuries, people have tried to decipher the meaning of Giza. For some, it's a temple to the stars. For others, a planetary energy hub. Some hypothesize that the pyramids weren't built by the Egyptians, but by the heirs of an older civilization, whose knowledge later disappeared. The proportions of the structures support this hypothesis. The height of a pyramid and the length of its base are related in the same way as the radius of the Earth and its circumference. This couldn't have been a coincidence. During research, traces of mysterious stone chambers sealed with blocks were discovered in the lower levels of the pyramids. Some of these chambers remain unopened. Instruments detect voids behind them. Perhaps unexplored chambers are hidden within. It is speculated that what is stored within is not the pharaoh's body, but something else, an archive of knowledge or devices whose purpose we can only guess at. When archaeologists first penetrated the interior in the 19th century, they expected riches, but they found neither gold nor jewelry inside, only empty chambers and silence. Perhaps the pyramid was never intended as a tomb. Perhaps it was intended for rituals associated with the soul's transition to another state. The Egyptians called the pyramids houses of eternity. For them, death was not an end, but a transition. They believed the pyramid shape symbolized the soul's ascent to the stars. The higher the peak, the closer to heaven. Therefore, Giza is more than just a stone. It is man's attempt to touch the heavens. In the 20th century, a pharaoh's boat was discovered near the pyramids, a wooden vessel, dismantled and hidden in a shaft. It was perfectly preserved. It may have been a symbolic vessel, carrying the pharaoh's soul to the afterlife. But mysteries remain. Why did the builders use blocks of different types of stone, including granite, which is difficult to cut even with modern tools? Why are the interior surfaces polished to a mirror finish? And how did they manage to lift multi-ton slabs to heights of tens of meters without machinery? Every evening, as the sun sets behind the pyramids, the sand around them changes color. Gold turns crimson, the air thickens, and time seems to stand still. Tourists stand silently, as if before something beyond words. The Giza Plateau is not a monument to the dead. It is a living machine, powered by the energy of eternity. Even after thousands of years, it continues to fulfill its purpose. To compel people to look upward, to search for meaning that is invisible but felt by every cell. And perhaps one day we will understand that the pyramids were built not to preserve bodies, but to remind us that man is capable of creating not for glory, but for immortality. Pyramids of Meroe. In the middle of the Sudanese desert, where the sand glows like copper in the sun, stand pyramids that almost no one knows about. They are smaller than the Egyptian ones, but no less mysterious. This is Meroe, a city that was once the capital of the Kushite kingdom, the heir to the ancient Nubian world. Here, far from the Nile, amidst the wind and silence, dozens of sharp pyramids rise from the sand like frozen spears. Each one preserves a story that time has chosen to forget. Meroe was discovered only in the 19th century, when European explorers following caravans stumbled upon rows of stone structures. They expected ruins, but instead found an entire necropolis, hundreds of tombs meticulously aligned with the rising sun. The pyramids range in height from 6 to 30 meters, and although smaller than their Egyptian counterparts, their proportions are the same: precise symmetry, sharp peaks, and perfectly calibrated angles. Meroe was a kingdom of women and warriors. It was ruled by queens called Kandakes. They wore crowns, wielded swords, and marched to war at the head of their armies. Pyramids were erected in their honor, not simply as burial places, but as gateways between worlds. On the walls, there are still depictions of Kandakes standing alongside the gods, receiving the light of the sun. The difference between the Meroitic pyramids and the Egyptian ones is immediately apparent. Egypt strives for grandeur, while Meroe strives for mystery. The pyramids here are not gigantic, but they seem to be assembled into a pattern. Each has a small chapel at its base, a place where rituals were performed. Texts in an incomprehensible script are carved into the walls of the chapels. Scholars call it the Meroitic alphabet. Decades of attempts have been made to decipher it, but the language remains unsolved. It is the only ancient African script that defies translation. Inside the pyramids are narrow chambers covered with frescoes. The walls depict scenes of the soul of the deceased rising to the sun, and the gods greeting it with open hands. The colors have been preserved: warm ochres, deep blues, and black outlines. This is not just art, but a belief that life continues beyond the sands. Some pyramids are in ruins, a consequence of greed and time. In the 19th century, the Italian adventurer Giuseppe Ferlini blew up several of them in search of treasure. He found only a few gold ornaments and fragments of sarcophagi, but destroyed entire complexes. The sand still bears traces of those explosions. However, the main mystery is the construction technology. The stones fit perfectly, without mortar. In some places, the joints are so narrow that it's impossible to fit even a blade between them. Moreover, the stone is sandstone, which crumbles easily. Achieving such precision required knowledge that, logically, the ancient craftsmen shouldn't have possessed. Scholars still debate why Meroe was built here, so far from rivers and oases. The desert is unforgiving, and survival in such conditions was nearly impossible. but the remains of aqueducts and canals indicate a complex water supply system. Perhaps the water was closer in ancient times, or the builders were skilled in finding underground springs. When the wind passes between the pyramids, it produces a sound similar to a low whistle. Locals call it the breath of the ancestors. They believe the souls of the kings still dwell here and protect the desert from evil. Sometimes at night, a light flickers above the pyramid, perhaps the reflection of a star, or perhaps something else. People say this is a sign the spirits are still awake. Modern archaeologists continue to discover astonishing things here. In one tomb, traces of gold were discovered, frozen as a thin film on the walls. This resembles a heat signature, as if something had once burned inside, emitting light. In another pyramid, fragments of an unknown, corrosion-resistant alloy were found. These findings fuel theories about lost technologies, possibly originating from ancient Egypt or an even earlier civilization. But despite all the mysteries, there's a sense of peace in Meroe. The stones don't overwhelm. They gaze calmly at the sky, as if they know their meaning. There's no trace of pride here, only memory. Sand covers the steps, but the lines of the pyramids remain clear. When dawn envelops the desert, the tops of the pyramids light up first, as if receiving fire from the sun. Everything around them freezes, even the wind. In these moments, it seems as if time doesn't move, but simply breathes. The pyramids of Meroe are not a replica of Egypt, but its reflection, like a star whose light outlasts its own life. They remind us that not everything great has to be enormous. Sometimes mystery lives in that which outlives noise and glory, remaining in silence, where stone whispers to sand, and sand holds the secret of eternity. Phaistos Disk. In southern Crete, in the ruins of the ancient palace of Phaistos, archaeologists have discovered an artifact that remains undecipherable. A small circle of baked clay, just the size of a palm, has become one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. It's called the Phaistos Disk, a discovery that has changed our understanding of ancient writing. Its surface is covered with a double-sided spiral of hand-pressed symbols, but these signs don't resemble any known alphabet. No one knows what they mean. The disk was discovered in the summer of 1902 by Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier. He was clearing an underground sanctuary when, beneath a layer of ash and debris, an unusually shaped object emerged. 79 symbols appear on one side, 60 on the other. A total of 242 symbols arranged in a spiral from the edge to the center. Clear dividers are visible between them, as if the author had written according to a predetermined rhythm. But the most astonishing thing is that each symbol is not scratched, but stamped, like a seal. This means the symbols were created using pre-made stamps. If true, the Phaistos Disk is the first example of typographic writing in human history. But who created it, and in what language? No one knows. The symbols depict heads, birds, shields, tools, plants, even boats. But their meaning is unclear. Some researchers believe it is a prayer. Others believe it is a calendar linked to the phases of the moon. Another theory is that the disk is a code, encrypted using musical or ritual symbols. Everything known about the context of the discovery only deepens the mystery. The disk lay in a room with no signs of damage, suggesting it was placed there intentionally, perhaps as a sacred object. Fragments of tablets inscribed with linear A, a script that remains undeciphered, were found nearby. This may indicate that the disk belonged to a culture that existed before the Minoans. On both sides, the spiral twists clockwise, a rare direction for ancient writing. This may have had a symbolic meaning. Some see it as the path of the sun, others as the soul's journey to the afterlife. At the center of the spiral is a symbol resembling a flower or a wheel, possibly a symbol of eternal return. For many, what's particularly strange is that the disk is crafted with a perfection beyond anything possible by chance. The thickness is uniform throughout the entire circle, the lines are even, and the spiral pitch never fluctuates. Even modern experts acknowledge that creating such a shape by hand is difficult. It requires knowledge of geometry and tools. Perhaps the craftsman used a ruler and compass, tools that officially didn't exist in that era. Some researchers claim that the symbols are not arranged randomly, but rather according to the laws of musical rhythm. If we replace the symbols with notes and consider the spiral a melody, we get a harmonious repetition, reminiscent of an ancient hymn. But this is merely a hypothesis. There were also some bold theories. Some believe the disk is encrypted using a system resembling binary code. Others see a map within it, perhaps a diagram of the starry sky or the sequence of planetary movements. But without a key, these are mere guesses. Interestingly, the surface of the disk is covered with a fine sheen, as if polished. This suggests the object was valuable and likely used in rituals. Perhaps it was placed on an altar and rotated, observing how the sun's rays glided across the symbols, transforming the spiral into a living glow. The material itself, clay, is also surprising. It contains impurities not typical of Crete. Analysis revealed that the clay could have been brought from other lands, possibly from the coast of Asia Minor. This suggests that the disk may not have been Cretan, but a foreign object brought here as a sacred relic. When the disk was transported to the Heraklion Museum, an aura of mysticism immediately surrounded it. Some saw it as a message from the gods, others as an ancient cipher. There are even legends that those who tried to translate the text fell ill or died. Of course, there is no proof, but this story cemented the disk's reputation as a cursed letter. Modern technology has made it possible to create a digital model and study it microscopically. Microscopic fingerprints are visible on the prints, as if the artist had touched fresh clay. Was he a priest, a craftsman, a scribe, or a keeper of secret knowledge? No one knows. Some archaeologists believe the Phaistos disk is not a text, but a learning artifact, a kind of symbol chart. It may have been an attempt to create a universal language combining sounds, images, and numbers. If so, its author was millennia ahead of his time. When you look at the disk, you're struck not only by the mystery of the symbols, but by the idea itself. The spiral, seemingly leading inward, evokes the movement of thought, the path to the center, to meaning, to truth. And perhaps this is the artifact's main meaning, to show that knowledge always goes in circles, returning to where it began. The Phaistos disk is more than just an ancient text. It is the stony breath of the human mind, which for the first time realized that thought could be encoded into a symbol. And until we find the key, it will remain what it was from the very beginning, a song frozen in clay, addressed to a future that is still not ready to hear it fully. Piri Reis map. In the early 16th century, the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis created a map that remains one of the most enigmatic in human history. It was discovered by chance in 1929 in Istanbul, when a piece of parchment was unearthed from under a pile of dust while sorting through the ancient archives of the Topkapi Palace. Dated 1513, the map depicted the known world of that time, but most importantly, it clearly showed Antarctica, ice-free. The problem is that Antarctica was discovered only in the 19th century, and the continent's subglacial contours became known only after the mid-20th century, when satellite images became available. However, the contours on the Piri Reis map match the continent's modern geography with astonishing accuracy. Researchers note that it depicts not a snow-covered coastline, but ice-free land. This means that the original map from which the Ottoman admiral copied was drawn at a time when Antarctica had not yet become covered in permanent snow. According to the inscription on the map itself, Piri Reis based it on 20 ancient maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, others to lost ancient navigators. This admission only added to the confusion. If he was telling the truth, then the map relied on sources that must be at least 5,000 years old.
The map is made of gazelle skin parchment, black, green, and red ink, fine lines, and elegant notations. Everything is executed with incredible precision. It depicts Europe, Africa, South America, and at the very edge, something Piri Reis called the land to the south. It is this part that is the most controversial.
In the 20th century, cartographers noticed that the coastlines coincided with the Antarctic coastline beneath the ice. Modern relief measurements have shown a near-perfect match. This means someone, in ancient times, saw Antarctica in its unfrozen state and was able to measure it. But who? Some scholars have suggested that Piri Reis accidentally distorted the outlines of South America. However, an analysis of the proportions refutes this. The distances between continents are accurately indicated, the scale is correct, and the lines correspond to modern coordinates. Furthermore, the map shows islands unknown to any European expedition of the early 16th century. The level of astronomical knowledge required for such precision is particularly astonishing. To depict the Earth as a projection that matches the modern spherical shape, knowledge of the planet's curvature was required. This discovery is attributed to the Renaissance, but the Piri Reis map shows that someone knew about the Earth's shape long before Columbus crossed the ocean. The map's margins bear Piri Reis's own handwritten notes. In one of them, he writes that he used old sea charts left over from before the flood. This phrase has spawned hundreds of hypotheses. Some historians believe it refers to a map of Atlantis, the continent that, according to legend, existed before the Great Flood. In the mid-20th century, the map attracted the attention of the U.S. Air Force. After the analysis was published, it was passed on to cartographers working with satellite imagery. The conclusion was stunning. The Antarctic coastline depicted on the Piri Reis map corresponds to the contours of the subglacial relief known only after 20th century geophysical exploration. This made one wonder either the Ottoman admiral had sources created by a civilization that had cartographic technology, or he had witnessed something that does not fit into our history. The map itself depicts not only continents but also strange details: enormous fish, unknown ships, and inscriptions about hot winds and lands where giants live are visible in the ocean. Perhaps some of these elements are the artistic conventions of the era, but in some places the inscriptions appear to be precise directions. For example, mountains are marked off the coast of South America that Europeans would only discover 3 centuries later. The inscriptions on the map are in Ottoman Turkish, but some words have no translation. Researchers speculate that these are copies of ancient symbols that Piri Reis did not understand but retained. Among them is an incomprehensible word resembling Atlan, which appears at the edge of the supposed Antarctica. Some believe the map was merely a fragment of a larger work. Piri Reis's diaries mention other parts of the world map, but they have been lost. Perhaps, had they survived, we would know of other continents he might have depicted. Today, the map is kept in the Topkapi Museum in a climate-controlled vault. Scientists continue to scan it using infrared technology, and recently discovered hidden lines, possibly original sketches. They were applied with a different pigment, older than the underlying layer. This confirms that Piri Reis did indeed copy an ancient source. Looking at this parchment, it seems to smell of sea salt and wind. Behind the fine ink lies not just geography, but a trace of memory. The Piri Reis map is not a document from the Ottoman era, but a mirror of the ancient world, where people knew the planet as it was before the ice. And perhaps, when the ice melts again, we will see the shores he drew and understand. The map wasn't ahead of its time. It was time that forgot that it once knew the way to the edge of the world. The Curse of Tutankhamun. When archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the tomb of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun in 1922, the entire world froze. For the first time in Egyptian history, the pharaoh's tomb was found intact, its treasures lying as they had been left 3,000 years earlier. But along with the discovery, something else awakened in the desert, a legend that still haunts today. It became known as the Pharaoh's Curse. From the very beginning of the excavations, a strange silence hung over the Valley of the Kings. The workers were afraid to enter the dungeon. On the wall near the entrance to the tomb, they read an inscription: "Death will overtake anyone who disturbs the Pharaoh's peace." Carter dismissed it as mere superstition. But a few weeks after the sarcophagus was opened, Lord Carnarvon, the philanthropist who had financed the excavations, died. His death was sudden. A mosquito bite on his face became infected. Blood poisoning set in, and when he died, a rumor spread throughout Cairo that the lights had gone out at that moment throughout the city. Journalists immediately picked up the story. A wave of deaths connected to the expedition began. One of the excavation participants died of lung disease, another died in a car accident, and a third shot himself. They had one thing in common. They were all present when the tomb was opened. Newspapers wrote that the pharaoh's vengeful spirit was taking revenge on those who disturbed his peace. Carter was untouched. He lived for another 16 years, though he complained of weakness and nightmares. It is said that he sometimes heard footsteps in the empty house and whispers in an ancient language. After his death, a note was found in his desk with the phrase, "I opened a door best left unwatched." But what was really going on? Scientists tried to explain everything rationally. Some said that mold spores and bacteria, deadly to humans, had been accumulating in the sealed tomb for centuries. During the first autopsy, they became airborne and infected those present. Others claimed it was simply a coincidence, but there were too many coincidences. Tutankhamun's tomb is a unique place. Its walls are covered with paintings depicting the soul's transition to the other world. The sarcophagus bears images of gods holding protective symbols. In the center is the face of the pharaoh, youthful and serene. He died at the age of 19, but his name has outlived all his contemporaries. When archaeologists began removing the artifacts, many noticed strange things. The metal objects hadn't tarnished, the fabrics hadn't deteriorated, and the scent of the oils seemed as if they'd been poured yesterday. This is impossible after 3,000 years of storage. Some gilded fragments reflected the torchlight so brightly they seemed alive. The sarcophagus itself consisted of 3 nested coffins. The innermost was made of pure gold. The pharaoh's face was covered by the famous gold mask, weighing over 10 kilograms. Its eyes were lapis lazuli, its eyebrows obsidian, its lips coral. It all looked as if the young ruler was simply asleep. But with each discovery, alarm grew. The photographer who took photos of the sarcophagus died. An official from the Ministry of Antiquities died, and an Egyptian prince who visited the tomb died. When Carter's bird, the falcon, a symbol of the pharaohs, died, the press declared, "The curse is at work." Some of the expedition's survivors admitted to feeling as if they were being watched. Minor oddities occurred in their homes. Objects disappeared, lamps went out, and the smell of incense was detected. One of the archaeologists who visited the tomb said he woke up at night with the sensation of someone standing at his head. He died shortly thereafter. Commenting on the events, Egyptian priests simply said, "The peace must not be disturbed." For them, a curse was not a threat, but a law. The disturbed soul returns to remind them of the boundaries between worlds. In the 20th century, the tomb was reopened for scientific study. Scientists recorded radiation levels and the chemical composition of the air. Nothing dangerous was found. But even modern museum staff sometimes report feeling a slight chill and heaviness in their chest when touching the sarcophagus, as if the air were becoming denser. Tutankhamun's sarcophagus is now kept in Luxor, under thick glass. Tourists gaze at the pharaoh's face, and many have a strange feeling, as if he were actually seeing. His gaze beneath the gold is calm but wary. He's not angry, simply observing. Perhaps the curse is not revenge, but a warning. The Egyptians believed that a person lives as long as their name is spoken. Tutankhamun remained silent for 3 millennia until a man came to open his door. Since then, his name has not ceased to be heard. And perhaps this is the true power of the ancient curse. It does not kill, it makes one remember. After all, anyone who has once looked into the eyes of the young pharaoh can never forget that there is a boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead. Thin as a golden mask, yet eternal as the desert itself. Library of Alexandria. On the shores of the Mediterranean in ancient Alexandria, once stood the greatest library in human history. It was the place where all the world's knowledge, gathered from all corners of the globe, was stored. It was more than just a repository of scrolls, but a temple of reason, where philosophers, astronomers, and scientists wrote, debated, and discovered the laws of the universe. And all of it disappeared, burned in a fire, traces of which are still being sought in the ashes of history. The library was founded by Ptolemy I, a student of Alexander the Great in the 3rd century BC. He dreamed of creating a center where everything known to humanity would be collected. Books from Greece, Babylon, India, and Egypt were brought here. Every ship arriving at the port of Alexandria was required to submit all its texts for copying. The originals were often retained, and the copies were returned to their owners. Thus the collection grew until, according to some estimates, it numbered over 700,000 scrolls. The greatest minds of the ancient world flocked here. Euclid created geometry. Archimedes discussed the floating of bodies. Eratosthenes calculated the Earth's circumference. Hipparchus compiled the first star map. And Heron described steam engines long before the invention of the engine. Not only mathematics and philosophy were studied here, but also medicine, music, history, and even alchemy. The library was part of a grand complex, the Museion, the House of the Muses. It was the world's first scholarly community. Scholars lived right on the premises, received state funding, and conducted research. It is said that book catalogs, laboratories, and archives first appeared here. Much of what we know about the ancient world began there. But no miracle lasts forever. The fate of Alexandria became a tragedy of knowledge. Officially, the library perished several times. the first catastrophe occurred when Julius Caesar waged war in Egypt. To stop the enemy fleet, he ordered the ships in the harbor to be burned. The fire spread to the city and reached the repository. The flames devoured thousands of scrolls, and the smoke hung over the sea like a black cloud. But part of the library is said to have survived. Scholars then transferred the remaining texts to the Serapeum, a temple dedicated to the god Serapis. The books remained there for several more centuries, until a new storm arose, a religious one. In the 4th century AD, Christian fanatics, considering ancient knowledge pagan, destroyed the temple and the last scrolls. Thus ended the era when man believed that knowledge was light. However, the true scale of the loss is impossible to measure. Among the lost texts could have been works that explained the structure of the world long before Galileo and Newton. Legends say that it contained books about ancient Atlantis, plans for flying machines, and records of stars that even modern telescopes had yet to see. Some historians believe the library was not completely destroyed. There is evidence that some of the scrolls were removed before the destruction, possibly to India, Persia, or the Vatican. Old maps mention copies from Alexandria. However, there is no confirmation of this. In the 20th century, archaeologists tried to find traces of the library. Underground passages beneath the modern city revealed the remains of halls with niches that may have once held scrolls. But no official evidence was found. Sand and sea obscured everything. But the memory remains. Even today, the phrase Alexandrian Library has become a symbol of lost knowledge. We don't know what exactly burned there, but we sense that, along with it, humanity lost a part of itself. Sometimes archaeologists find charred fragments of papyrus. They bear a few words, faded by time. Each one is like the breath of a vanished world. Measure of light, breath of heaven, path of the star, fragments that trail off into nothingness. The modern Library of Alexandria, built on the same site, is a mere shadow of its ancient grandeur. Its glass and granite walls reflect the sun, as if the past still burns. Inside are millions of books, digital archives, and exhibitions. But when you enter, you sense that the silence is not one of pride, but of sorrow. The Library of Alexandria was more than just a collection of texts. It was a bridge between civilizations. And when it collapsed, humanity found itself on opposite sides of time. It reminds us that fire isn't always an enemy. Sometimes it simply tests who is ready to carry knowledge forward. After all, if the meaning is truly great, it doesn't burn out. It turns into light that will one day once again illuminate the land where the books that wrote the history of the world once burned. Sacsayhuaman. High in the Andes, above the ancient city of Cusco, lies a place where stone seems to live. Sacsayhuaman is a Cyclopean fortress built by the Incas, or, as local legends claim, by those who lived long before them. Here, enormous boulders, some weighing hundreds of tons, are joined together with such precision that it's impossible to fit even a blade between them. But the secret isn't just in their shape, it's in how these stones ended up on the mountaintop in the first place. Scientists speculate that the stones were worked by hand, using copper tools and stone hammers. But this doesn't explain how they were lifted. After all, the quarries where the stones were extracted are located tens of kilometers away. Transporting them up mountain slopes requires mechanical and logistical knowledge that the ancient Incas lacked. Some archaeologists have proposed a system of ramps and rope pulleys, but no reconstruction has demonstrated that such a method could have moved a boulder weighing hundreds of tons. When the sun rises over Sacsayhuaman, shadows appear on the walls, creating the illusion of waves. From above, the complex resembles a giant snake or lightning bolt, symbols that held sacred significance to the Incas. Perhaps the fortress was not a fortification, but a ritual site where earth and sky were united in a single symbol. Local legends say Sacsayhuaman was built not by humans, but by gods, the Viracochas, who came from the east after the Great Flood. They taught people to build, cut stone, and sew, and then disappeared. The stones, according to legend, were left as a reminder. In the mid-20th century, archaeologists discovered underground passages leading from Sacsayhuaman deep into the mountain. Some tunnels have collapsed, while others extend for kilometers. According to legend, they connected Cusco with other sacred sites in Peru, including Machu Picchu, but exploring them is impossible. Many are buried or too narrow. Traces of old cuts are visible on the fortress walls, as if someone had carved blocks from the monolith, as if from soft clay. This has led to the hypothesis that the ancients possessed the knowledge to soften stone, Modern geochemists have found plants in the region with acidic juices capable of dissolving limestone and granite. Perhaps the secret of the ancient masters lay not in power, but in chemistry, but the formulas are lost forever. When the Spaniards arrived in Cusco, they were astonished by Sacsayhuaman. One chronicler wrote that, if 1,000 devils had not labored on these walls, man would not have been able to build them. The conquerors destroyed part of the complex, using the stones to build houses, but the largest blocks remained standing. They still stand, as if mocking time. During the rainy season, moisture seeps between the boulders, causing the walls to glisten. Locals then say the stones breathe. They believe the fortress is alive and holds the energy of their ancestors. Every year, the Inti Raymi Festival, the Festival of the Sun, is held here, drawing thousands of people. Drums beat against the backdrop of these stones, and it seems as if the ancient power is reawakening. Modern scholars continue to search for meaning in the geometry of Sacsayhuaman. The complex is positioned so that its lines align with the solstices and equinoxes. Some blocks form animal figures, snakes, llamas, and condors. Perhaps this was a map of the starry sky, translated to Earth. Standing at the foot of the wall and looking up, you get a strange feeling, as if you're being watched. These stones don't seem lifeless. They look as if they've remembered those who placed them, and still recall the hands that touched them millennia ago. Sacsayhuaman is not a ruin. It is the trace of a thought, carved into granite. The people who created it left no writing, but they left a message. Eternity lies not in words, but in what outlives time. And perhaps someday someone will read these walls like a book, not with their eyes, but with their heart, and understand that they speak not of stones, but of the memory of the earth itself. Easter Island, in the vast silence of the Pacific Ocean, thousands of kilometers from the nearest shore, lies a tiny speck of land, surrounded by waters and legends. Easter Island is a place where time seems to stand still. On its slopes, covered in grass and black volcanic dust, stand hundreds of gigantic stone figures, gazing out toward the ocean. They are called Moai, silent guardians, seemingly guarding the secret of a vanished people. When the first Europeans landed here in the 18th century, the island already looked abandoned. The forests had been cleared, the land was depleted, and the inhabitants lived in poor huts. No one could explain who created these stone giants, or why. The Moai tower several meters tall, some reaching 10, and weigh tens of tons. Their faces are calm and stern, with elongated noses and thin lips. They all look in the same direction, as if expecting something to come from the sea. Local legends say the Moai are images of ancestors who protect their descendants. Each clan on the island erected their own statues, believing the spirits of their ancestors would bring fertility and protection. But who managed to carve them from solid blocks of volcanic rock and install them on the slopes remains a mystery. The Moai were created in the quarry of Rano Raraku, a volcano whose walls are still littered with unfinished figures. Some are half-carved, others lie on the slopes, as if abandoned in haste. Scientists estimate that each statue required over 100 people, and the process took months. But how the figures, weighing tens of tons, were transported for kilometers remains a mystery. Some believe the Moai were rolled on logs, but the island had long since lost its forests. Others suggest the statues were pulled by ropes with a walking motion, swaying them forward as if they were alive. Indeed, experiments have shown this method to be feasible. But then another question arises. Why would people, exhausted by hunger and isolation, continue to erect gigantic statues instead of saving themselves? There's a theory that building Moai was a religious madness. People believed that the more statues they had, the greater the gods' protection. They cut down the last trees to move the stones, ultimately destroying their own ecosystem. The land parched, crops failed, and the culture collapsed. But there's another theory, that the catastrophe wasn't caused by them, but by the Europeans who arrived later, bringing disease and slavery. Archaeologists have discovered that many Moai have bodies hidden underground. For a long time, it was thought they were just heads, but excavations revealed that the figures have full torsos covered in carvings. Symbols are visible on their backs: birds, eyes, suns, and mysterious signs resembling writing. These may be texts telling the story of the people's origins, but no one can decipher them. Among the most astonishing discoveries is the presence of Ahu stone platforms on the island on which Moai stood. These platforms are composed of perfectly fitted blocks, similar in technology to the walls in Peru. Is this a coincidence? Or was there a connection between the ancient cultures that history hasn't revealed? Scholars have attempted to date the construction of the statues. The first moai appeared about 1,000 years ago, and the last 200 years before the arrival of Europeans. Then the tradition suddenly ended. Perhaps at that point, the community had exhausted itself. Perhaps the last statue was meant to be a prayer for salvation, but the answer never came. Local elders believe the moai are still alive. They say you can hear the stones breathing at night, and their eyes, once adorned with coral, shone in the moonlight. Their legends feature the word mana, the power contained in spirits. The moai, they believe, are vessels of this power. In the 20th century, archaeologists recovered several statues that had fallen from time and storms. When they were reinstalled, residents said they've awakened. That evening, the wind on the island suddenly died down, and the ocean became smooth as a mirror. Today, Easter Island is a place where man and stone look in the same direction. The moai stand silently, their faces turned to the ground, as if they guard not the inhabitants but memory itself. There is no pride in them, only a calm dignity, like guardians who have fulfilled their duty. When the sun sets, the shadows of the moai stretch out across the slopes, seeming to move. At such moments, the island breathes with the breath of ancient time. Easter Island is more than just an archaeological mystery. It is a reminder of the power of faith and the fine line between creation and destruction. These stone faces contain the history of a people who wanted to leave a mark on eternity, and succeeded. Lunyu Caves, in eastern China, among the green hills of Zhejiang province, something hidden beneath the Earth's surface amazes even seasoned archaeologists. These are the Longyu Grottos, a grand underground complex carved out of solid rock. Its scale, precision, and the mystery of its origin have baffled science for decades. No one knows who created these halls, why, or how they did it. It all began in the summer of 1992, when a local farmer decided to dig a pond to store water. Beneath the earth, he stumbled upon solid rock, and beneath that, a void. When explorers descended, they found not a natural cave, but a man-made chamber 17 meters high. The walls were polished to a mirror finish, and the ceiling was decorated with raised stripes, reminiscent of the hatching of a huge instrument. Since then, more than 30 such halls have been discovered. All are carved into monolithic rock, with no signs of collapse or cracks. Each hall has perfect geometric shapes, columns, and corridors, as if it were an underground palace. According to engineers' calculations, the total volume of rock excavated is approximately 1 million cubic meters, the equivalent of building the Great Pyramid. But unlike the Great Pyramid, there is not a single inscription explaining who built them or when. There are engineers who have explored the caves claim that the marks on the walls are identical in angle and spacing, as if they were made mechanically. But if this is true, it means the builders possess technologies that we cannot reproduce even today. Geologists note that the rock in these areas is extremely hard, and it would be impossible to carve it by hand with such precision. Some chambers are interconnected, others are isolated. Some contain artificial pools and podiums, seemingly intended for rituals. But not a single object has been found that points to a specific function. Some researchers believe they are storage facilities. Others are ancient sanctuaries, created for observing the stars through special shafts leading to the surface. The acoustics are particularly striking. A sound spoken in the center of the hall is reflected multiple times, creating the effect of a voice coming from everywhere. Perhaps the ancients knew the secret of resonance and used it for ceremonies. Some explorers who have stood in the caves claim to have felt a vibration in the air, as if the walls were responding to a person's presence. Another mystery is symmetry. All the caves are oriented in the same direction, and their arrangement forms a pattern reminiscent of a constellation. If you connect them on a map, the resulting shape resembles the Big Dipper. This could be a coincidence, or it could be evidence that the builders followed an astronomical plan. For centuries, locals considered this place Sleeping Mountains. They avoided it, believing spirits lived underground. After Lunyu's discovery, rumors began of strange sounds at night and lights appearing at the entrances. Of course, this could be explained by humidity and the moon's reflection, but the legends persisted. Scientists have attempted to date the caves. Radiocarbon dating has yielded inconclusive results, but one thing is clear: they are at least 2,000 years old. This means they were built before the Qin dynasty, when China was just beginning to unify. However, there is no evidence of such advanced engineering techniques being used during that period. Some archaeologists speculate that Longyu is part of a larger system, extending deeper underground. Modern scanners reveal possible voids beneath the existing halls, but they cannot yet be explored because the structure is too unstable. There's also a bold hypothesis. The Longyu caves are not a human creation, but a place where ancient people found refuge during a catastrophe. Perhaps they were escaping a flood or a meteorite, carving out an underground city to wait out the destruction of the surface. Then the silence and lack of traces of life would explain the cave's inhabitants. They may have perished or left, leaving behind only stone. Today, Longyu is open to the public, but even tourists descend into silence. Inside, the air is thick and humid, and it seems as if the walls hold the breath of those who created them. The light of lanterns reveals the gleaming traces of the carvings, which run in precise lines before disappearing into the darkness. No one knows why or by whom this was done, but standing in one of the halls, you feel as if you're not just underground, but beneath the surface of history, in a place where man first understood that darkness could be not an enemy, but a home. The Longyu caves are more than just an archaeological mystery. They are the shadow of a civilization that knew how to build without words, create without trace, and vanish without a trace. Pharos mechanism. On the northern coast of Egypt, where the ancient city of Alexandria once stood one of the greatest wonders of the ancient world, the lighthouse on the island of Pharos. It was so tall that its light could be seen for tens of kilometers, and it became a symbol of guiding light for all ancient seafarers. But behind the legendary tower lay another, lesser-known secret, the mechanism that kept its light burning even during storms. This mechanism has yet to be restored, and information about it survives only in fragments of ancient chronicles. The Pharos lighthouse was built during the reign of Ptolemy II, around the 3rd century BC. Reaching over 100 meters in height, it was more than just a tower, but an engineering marvel. Inside, it contained staircases, shafts, mirrored surfaces, and a complex lighting system. But the mystery lay not in the architecture, but in how the light rose to such a height and remained stable. Ancient authors wrote that a huge bronze bowl containing a flame stood at the top of the lighthouse. Above it was a polished metal disc, a mirror that reflected light into the sea. But if the descriptions are to be believed, the light was so bright that it was blinding and visible even during the day. This is impossible for ordinary fire. This means that some kind of amplification mechanism was used in the design, perhaps a system of lenses or mirrors, lost over time. Some researchers believe the lighthouse used glass lenses filled with water, magnifying and directing the beam. This effectively makes the Pharos the first prototype of the modern searchlight. However, none of the artifacts discovered from that time confirm the existence of such technology. Other theories suggest the tower employed a primitive reflective system, creating a moving pulse of light, as if the lighthouse's heart beat in time with the wind. Perhaps the Pharos' engineers harnessed the power of wind and pressure. It's hypothesized that the tower housed an underground mechanism, a combination of levers and pistons, that moved the mirror, causing the beam to change direction. This explains why ancient navigators described the lighthouse's light as revolving. This would have been unthinkable in their time. Old drawings show that the tower's base was adorned with figures of sea gods, and a statue of Poseidon stood at the top. But at night, according to ancient chronicles, the figure seemed to glow. Perhaps the statue was coated with a mixture of metals that reflected the light. Some texts claim that during the full moon, the entire lighthouse glowed with a soft bluish light, as if imbued with energy. After the earthquakes that destroyed the Pharos, the tower's debris sank underwater. Underwater archaeologists found enormous stone blocks and fragments of bronze components. Among them were pieces of curved metal, resembling parts of a mechanism. They were covered in a layer of salt and shells, but underneath, traces of polishing were preserved. These may be the remains of the mirror system that created the legendary glow. Some researchers link the Pharos to another mysterious artifact, the Antikythera mechanism. Both devices date back to the same era and demonstrate a level of engineering ingenuity unattainable for their time. It's possible that Alexandria had a school of craftsmen skilled in precision mechanics. Their knowledge may have been preserved in the burned-out library, and the lighthouse was just one of their achievements. Locals still have legends about a faint glow that can be seen at night over the sunken ruins of Pharos. Fishermen call it a breath of light. They say that mirror fragments reflecting the moon are still visible underwater, and that the sea in this area seems to preserve the memory of an ancient glow. Modern scientists, using underwater drones, have discovered strange rounded stone foundations and cavities beneath the water that could have been part of an ancient mechanism. According to one hypothesis, the lighthouse was powered by air and water, creating a pressure effect within that fueled the fire. This may have been the first prototype of a steam-powered device in history, too early for its contemporaries to understand. But all that remains of the Pharos are stones and water. Its light has faded, but the legend lives on. Every time you enter the old port of Alexandria, you feel as if the air still retains that vibration, a soft echo of light piercing the darkness. The Vatican Archives. In the very heart of Rome, behind the thick walls of the Vatican Palace, there is a place where outsiders are not allowed. This is the Vatican's secret archives, the largest document repository on Earth. Its underground corridors stretch for kilometers, and its shelves, according to estimates, can hold tens of millions of pages. Here lies the history of humanity, not only the churches, but also that which is preferred to be forgotten. Access to the archive is strictly restricted. Access is granted to only a few scholars each year, and even they are limited to 3 documents per visit. Each request is reviewed for weeks, and many topics are inaccessible entirely. Rumor has it that there are several levels of storage facilities beneath the main building, accessible only to papal custodians. Legends about the Vatican archives have proliferated over the centuries. Some claim that evidence of Christ's existence and the originals of his letters are hidden there. Others claim that the archives contain texts discovered after the destruction of the Library of Alexandria and ancient books written in languages no one else knows. Rumors also suggest that manuscripts detailing pre-flood civilizations and reports from Vatican expeditions to Antarctica and Tibet are buried underground. Officially, however, everything is simpler. It does contain letters from Michelangelo, Galileo, and Napoleon, documents from the Inquisition trials, and even the sentence of Giordano Bruno. But even if we put aside the myths, the mystery remains. How was it possible to collect and preserve such a wealth of information over 2,000 years? Some researchers admitted to the archive described a strange feeling, as if the walls remembered. The air there is cold and dry, the light soft and subdued. Leather volumes bound with red cords line the shelves, and between them, scrolls and dust-covered boxes. One room contains documents written on sheepskin parchment, the letters pressed out rather than written. Another contains tiny tomes written in a microscopic hand, as if the author were afraid of being read. There's a belief that the Vatican archives are not just a repository, but a kind of nervous system for the Church. All important events, wars, the fall of empires, discoveries, were known to the Pope in advance because reports from all over the world flowed into the archive. If this is true, then the archives aren't just archives, but a mechanism for managing history. But there are even more disturbing rumors. Among the manuscripts, they say, are books forbidden even by the custodians. Some of these are ancient texts about the origins of humanity. Others are prophecies written with astonishing accuracy. Some sources claim that the Vatican possesses a fragment of the complete Gospel of Judas, as well as an ancient text about the flood, older than Sumerian cuneiform. Underground tunnels leading from the archives are rumored to connect to catacombs, containing the remains of early martyrs and secret altars. Archaeologists cannot confirm this, but Vatican plans do show numerous sealed passages leading underground. Modern technologies make it possible to digitize ancient manuscripts, but not everything is made publicly available. Of the 70 kilometers of shelves, only a small portion has been published. The rest remains sealed, classified, for papal eyes. Sometimes random information surfaces. For example, at the end of the 20th century, one researcher reported seeing a document describing a strange metal object found in the desert in the 16th century, along with a papal letter prohibiting disclosure of the find. Another claimed to have seen a map depicting Antarctica without ice, a near copy of the Piri Reis map. But there's no evidence. All witnesses signed a pledge of perpetual silence. Standing at the entrance to the Vatican archives, you feel as if you're looking not at a building, but at the horizon of time. Behind the heavy door lies not just history, but its shadow. Perhaps within truly lie answers to questions humanity isn't yet ready to hear. After all, the archive's secret lies not in what it conceals, but in its very existence, a reminder that knowledge itself can be more dangerous than any power. And while its doors are closed, the Vatican remains not only a spiritual center, but also the custodian of the greatest mystery of all, what is written about us, but not intended for us. From Jordan to China, from Sudan to Peru, every continent bears the traces of civilizations that seem to speak to eternity in their own language. Their stones have survived storms and kingdoms, and their secrets still whisper through the dust of centuries. Every pyramid, cave, and inscription is not just a memory, but an invitation to look within. After all, man never ceases searching, because he senses that hidden within these mysteries is not the history of the gods, but our own history. We build to remember, and we forget to seek again. And perhaps this is precisely the meaning of all ancient miracles, a reminder that knowledge is not a thing of time. It merely awaits those who can hear it. The wind passes between the ruins, the sun glides across the stones, and it seems as if the earth itself is speaking. All that is lost is not yet gone. It simply waits for man to raise his eyes to the sky again,